But also,
oh God. Oh, I made a mistake. I made a mistake.
in thinking about optimization versus escape, what are you doing it for? Why are you using it? Whether it's microdosing mushrooms or using caffeine or nicotine, it's each person have their own discretion on what they feel like kind of puts them in a state that they're comfortable with.
Because sometimes I think we try to force ourselves to do stuff that's not natty enough, and then we get fucked up the other direction. Right?
That's well, you said it. It's forcing doesn't work. And when we didn't have the internet and we didn't have these things in these paradigms that existed in different parts of the world at the exact same time, but yet these people weren't communicating, and yet we find that these postures, they are alignment to the earth, the sun.
Nsima's there right now.
Yeah.
After you said I feel like I'm getting some energy, I'm like, did you smoke?
They say stuff in yoga and they talk real nice and real kind, and I'm just like, my wrist just feels like it's going to break in this position. Like, I can't really think of some of the stuff they're talking about because my focus, my brain, the space in my brain is being consumed and overridden by this maybe particular pain or sensation that I have. That's
something that might be limiting your greatness, right? And if these are things that are practices of life and awarenesses that we're able to, it's a game we can play, but first we have to transcend into a higher thing. We have to get out of the place of judgment and get into the state of witnessing and learning. And now it's an attitude of understanding and connection. And that's essentially, when we think about neuroplasticity and flexibility of the mind, that's really the goal. It's trying to facilitate connection. And these things that we do sometimes in our thoughts, I think, are actually stopping our brain from achieving the states that we want to achieve.
How are you taking some people that have chronic pain, they don't want to move, their brain almost won't allow them to move, they got a governor set on them because they don't believe they can do certain things. How are you helping these people?
You have to respect their pain. We can measure marks right now and go through about 15 minutes of that, and we can put probably 1.5 inches on it, tip to tip.
Yeah.
In days, you can add more and more and more because you got to think.
Now.
You want to rewind that?
Tip to tip. Dermal layers, your lymphatic pathway, and your veins are kind of moving through that space, and that's what's pulling all the waste products and all the deoxygenated used blood out of the body, right? And that's why all the veins are right here, kind of close to the surface. It's in the
That's
same
from Trend.
Powerproject family, how's it going? Now, as you guys know, we have been talking about cold therapy for a while. Mark, Andrew, and myself, we all use cold plunge XLs since we're pretty big. But the cold plunge is amazing. And there are a lot of cold therapy tools out there. Obviously, you can use your shower. But the amazing thing about the cold plunge is, number one, it doesn't take up much space in your home or your backyard. And number two, you don't need to change your water, unlike other cold therapy devices, for 6 months to a year. It filters itself. Let's not even talk about all the benefits of cold plunging, like the dopamine release, how good you feel after doing it, and just the cascade of hormones that happens after you get in some really cold water. It's crazy, and we love it. So, Andrew, how can they get it?
Absolutely. You guys got to head over to thecoldplunge.com, and at checkout, enter promo code PowerProject to save $150 off your very own cold plunge. Again, thecoldplunge.com, links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes.
Brett Favre, Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, so there's a lot.
Yeah, do whatever you
Oh, shit, Oprah's down
If you
there?
need to
Oprah's
get
from
anywhere,
Mississippi,
you
yeah.
can just like, looks like
Jerry Rice, Walter Payton.
Jerry Rice went to college there, huh?
Yeah, he went to Jackson State. And then
the GOAT.
Walter Payton.
Another GOAT.
Damn.
Brett Favre, I'm saying legends.
Yeah, Brett Favre played, 8-man football there, right?
In Hancock. No, that was Peyton Manning.
Oh.
That's in Mississippi too. Yeah, so they're all associated in Mississippi too. All the Peytons. Yeah, there's a lot of greats, but it's kind of because it is kind of gutter in a way. Think about what inspires.
I never been.
And greatness is people that have learned to be very adaptable. And I think Mississippi's a good place to learn that.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
All right, you have a pen, right?
Sure.
How do you take a hit of that?
2-3 seconds.
So you just suck. You don't have to press anything.
We talking about drugs?
Yeah.
No.
This will be interesting. I've never done this during a podcast before.
The one episode that your mom checks into.
Stop it.
I'm just saying.
It's CBD.
Oh my God, I knew I shouldn't watch this stuff.
It's definitely CBD.
Is it?
Yeah. But also,
Oh, God. Oh, I made a mistake. I made a mistake. I thought you were serious about the CBD thing, so I just took a little bit extra.
Right.
I mean, it is CBD.
I guess.
Look,
That's crazy.
heck yeah.
This will be fun. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah,
If I'm just silent during the whole interview,
That's okay.
it's the Mark Bell's Power Project for a reason.
You'll be within your own thoughts over there. You'll know you're like working shit out, you know?
Look, you do this every day. You got to find something to keep it interesting, right?
How long have you been messing around with some of this stuff?
What stuff?
This stuff, the vape, and you had a dip in before, and we got
Oh.
like some fucking pre-workout and some kratom going on over here.
Hey, I'm
We're having a
experiencing
party.
Yeah, man. Well, think about it. It's all in thinking about optimization versus escape. What are you doing it for? Why are you using it? Whether it's microdosing mushrooms or using caffeine or nicotine, it's to each person have their own discretion on what they feel like kind of puts them in a state that they're comfortable with. And dependency is a different thing. But I think whenever you train, it helps you to purge your system and really have a clean slate to detoxify and different things to where, experimentation is not a negative. And you think about the outcomes of what these things do, and also giving yourself a break here and there. There's times I'll skip pre-workout for 2-3 days just for the sake of it becomes a morning ritual, But I do athletic greens every morning. I put the pre-workout in there. It sweetens it up. And then, but even the athletic greens on Saturday and Sunday, a lot of times I'll skip it just because, I think it's just good to your body to have remember what the other thing is or what it's like not having it,
You took us through some interesting things in the gym. A lot of it was just like real simple stuff on the floor. And I know you said that that's kind of step one, and there's a lot of other fun stuff you can get into. But I think maybe we could start with, why would you start someone there? And let's just kind of just say it's somebody that's potentially in pain or somebody that's not moving great. Why would you start them on the ground, and why would you start them using the wall?
Well, developmental neuro was really what got me into understanding the value of the ground. And you look at children and you look at the way that every single human has a blueprint in their nervous system based off of their eagerness to fight gravity, number one, and two, their excitement about exploring their environment, right? Well, what stops you from exploring your environment is hypersensitivity. So if you're a baby, just like if you're a grown human, you're going to, let's just say, for instance, the grass on the baby's feet, like nails on a chalkboard, right? It's like they freeze. They don't like it. It's wet grass. This is gross. And they are not moving. So the avoidance of that grass is could in turn plant a seed and create a big problem, because now they're not exploring their environment. That's a mental. It's the body's interpretation of the environment.
Maybe somebody has a problem with their knee and they don't want to get down on the ground, right?
And you felt a little bit of that when we were doing on hands and knees.
Yep.
And so we get down into thinking about muscle, and we think about bone or connective tissue in this Newtonian way, but we forget that we're integrated from small babies, and we have the information. Nobody taught you how to do that. Our own fight of figuring out how to get from our backs to our bellies, to our side, to our knees, or even creeping along on the elbows, like all those are milestones that build upon each other, and you can't skip a step. We'll see children in the clinic that they can stand great, and they can even stand to the point where they can almost balance themselves, but they're not walking. And it's because they're put in standers all the time. And the kids experiencing standing, they enjoy it. But the reason they can't walk is because they haven't crawled. Because crawling is what creates the dissociation of the hips and the shoulder girdle. So that experience of them crawling, just for a couple days even, now they're walking, you know. So that's the idea, is that we have a ladder that we come up. It's your ladder, it's my ladder, it's his ladder. And it's personal, because how you got there is different than how I got there and when, right? You see some babies might walk at 15 months, some might walk at 10 months or 9 months, right? So it's the range that we understand, and we're not really looking at anything and calling it pathology unless it's outside of that range. So it feels like 16 months now, I might see them, right? Or 17 months and they're not walking. It's like, what's going on? But that's the idea. And we don't treat babies per se, but we treat the community. So babies are part of that community. And that's kind of my experience has always been. I just like the idea of thinking of those principles and how I can help an athlete with that, right? And you think about an orthopedic injury or frozen shoulder or this pathology that is plaguing us, right? And it's all tied to the way we regulate our autonomic nervous system and create states of being, right? And we feel like these things are fixed or we're subject to our environment. And so as far as the developmental process, it's just a great analogy too. If you think about as we get older, it's the same ladder, we kind of fall back down. And you look at the movement skills that deteriorate, they're basically the same skills. It's in reverse order of in which we gain them, right? So if you look at loss of rotation, if you look at certain pathologies like Parkinson's and shuffling gait, they're not getting separation of their hips and shoulders. And so a lot of the foundation of movement is based off of, gait patterns, but you can go even deeper into the breathing pattern, the diaphragm and how it's controlling the pressurization of the core, how it's helping and assisting your pelvis and creating a foundation for your body to sit on. And you can even look at a lot of the things in babies, for instance, right? And you see adducted scapulas, right? They don't have core support. Their hips are behind them. Their cores are extended. And this is the first posture a baby walks in. Right?
Yeah, sometimes
That's honestly perfect.
Toes are in.
Yeah.
Toes are.
And so they got like almost like an internal rotation of the lower body and external rotation of the upper.
So they're sitting into these efficient pathways.
Fucking kids are overextended. Unbelievable.
Right. Super hyperextended. But if you think about what does an 8-hour office sitting
what's
job
that do to you?
It's simulating the same effect, right? And so clinically, that's what I would see a lot of is, especially in sedentary obese populations, where you would have that were in long-standing office jobs. And essentially, I'm like, that's the same thing, you know? And you think about it, okay, well, in that
Wouldn't
case...
sitting be the opposite way? Wouldn't it be more folded over or no?
Well, it depends. It depends. There's a hip flexor contracture that's forming that once you stand, the attachment of the psoas on the front of the spine, it drags the spine into hyperextension. And so you have to make that up somewhere. So
Would
you
it be
can...
hyperextension or flexion? Like...
It'd be hyperextension because your hips would be pointed towards the ground a little bit because you
Right.
got so tight in the front.
They call it a lordosis to describe the lumbar curvature.
Right.
Okay. So you say it's an excessive lordosis, or it's like it's getting to the point where the spine's meant to stack upon itself. So you want to create neutral forces on this axial load, this 0 degrees to gravity, and we're naturally doing it, right? And we can base it off of our 2 points of support. There's 4 points of support, right? So now I can actually, if I'm leaning forward, it's all based off of my orientation and sensation of vertical.
Can you bring up Meg squats? Just because she's hot. But,
Rib cage over
no,
there.
can you bring up Meg? Yeah, she did something with the rib cage the other day, and I think this will really help the people that are watching.
Sure.
I think it will help identify. She just showed something. She was like, "Hey, this would really help with the squat," and I was like, "That's really brilliant." She demonstrated it really well, but I was also thinking like, that's going to help people in their day-to-day life, getting that spine straight.
That's baby adducted position. This is a high school 9th grader that's learning how to squat.
Yeah.
And so how does the coach that's coaching 30 kids move this session along and teach people what they need to learn.
I think it's
the purple one.
Yeah,
This one?
Yeah.
I think it's that one. Yeah. Yeah, she's showing some overextension, and then she just kind of clamped down on the rib cage and the stomach, pulling the belly button in a little bit and keeping the back kind of flat.
Mm-hmm. That's a good representation of a posterior pelvic tilt. And she's basically, if you think of the crown of her head and her tailbone, when she does that, it's stacked up against that 0 degree axis that we're talking about.
So it's hard to say, and this was not anything that she was saying. She was just saying, like, this is a good activity to learn for squatting.
Yeah.
Do you think
it's a movement skill?
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that people should practice being able to do that, or do you think that people should primarily try to stand that way? Or
no?
What's your take on that? Because sometimes I think we try to force ourselves to do stuff that's not natty enough, and then we get fucked up the other direction. Right?
Well, you said it. It's forcing doesn't work. What I've learned is that you have to put the human mind, and you have to understand the psychology is real, and it is what it is. Okay, so reverse psychology works for a reason, right? Because people don't want to be told what to do. And as much as, even if Nassim came to me for help with a shoulder problem, there's parts of this where I need to help make him empowered to address and to understand the shoulder problem, so he becomes an advocate for himself in this shoulder. And in doing so, I'm also limiting his need for me as a clinician or business owner, right? So what most people in my field can do is they can accentuate what it is, the value they're bringing, and they become the fixer or the healer, right? But now, if I'm not fixing shit, I'm not healing anything. Nassim's body and the wonderful body we've all been given has the ability to heal, right? Under the conditions of a neutrality of balance.
So I'm actually curious about this. You know, like the GOATA guys that came on, they have a way that they believe that people should be standing. And one thing that I've seen, I'm not going to call out anybody, but I've seen some of their coaches try to mimic that way of standing with the somewhat pigeon-toed, butt out or whatever, right? And you know that's not the way that they stand, because when they're in those positions, taking pictures, etc., they are very awkward. It is not the way they move, but they're trying to make their bodies get into that positioning.
Right. And what they're speaking to, and I think it's more about and I've learned this a lot, it's more about we're kind of talking about the same thing, and then we can find areas where there's like small indiscretions, and then it's easy to kind of harp on it. They're saying there is an optimal standing posture, which I would say, yeah, there's an optimal way to stand, but I would say it does mirror kind of the mountain pose in yoga. If you've ever done yoga, there's a positioning and posture to it, and it's saying I'm presenting myself to the world in a way that is strong and powerful, and your body does have a nice way of how even blood flows and how your nervous system talks. It's almost, if you stand there,
like wrapping your hands around your penis. Is there a reason for that?
Well, remember we're talking about the lat.
I mean, I can get behind that.
Right.
Oh.
So think.
Oh, okay.
Right. So you can.
Oh, you were going more in close.
Right. So this always. Well, and I hadn't gotten there yet. So I always. So I start here, but you think about it, you go here to here. That's it. So just think about the dynamics of when your palms are facing your groin, and now bring your palms into the position he's in.
That's what you talked about, that empowering position.
But
I can feel that. It's a weird thing, but I can feel that when I'm running.
Right.
When I'm running and I just get into like some good sunlight and there's some good scenery, I feel a little bit, I feel empowered. I feel like, my palms are kind of like up, almost like receiving some sort of energy from the universe, as weird as that might sound.
Well, these are things that go back into ancient thinking that we're just not connected back to. But think about the thousands of years of human existence, and when we didn't have the internet and we didn't have these things, in these paradigms that existed in different parts of the world at the exact same time, but yet these people weren't communicating. And yet we find that these postures, they are alignment to the earth, the sun.
Nsima's there right now.
Yeah.
After you said, I feel like I'm getting some energy, I'm like, did you smoke?
Well, what do the earth medicines do, in a sense? I think it just puts you in a perspective that puts your ego in a little farther back position, and it gives you more of a sense of what is and your connection to the whole.
It does sound weird, but like, yeah, when you take shrooms, you're like, I feel at one with everything and everyone. And then when you say that, people are like, bro, you've done too much.
Well, energetically, I think you are more, it's more about that. Once you transcend our physical body, my belief is that you transcend into that spirit, and that part, there's a part of you that is a higher power. It's God, if you will, and it's in your heart, it's in your mind, it's a witness, it's a part of you that can surpass judgment, and it's something that you can, it's a state. But it's just like we're talking about with recovery in a powerlifter, right? The quicker he can turn his mind into a state of recovery and condition himself, his physiology can then mirror that recovery. And now he can be ready when the time comes. He's not just burning fuel for no reason mentally in the mind.
Probably explains John Hack, who we talk about incessantly on the show because he's a fucking freak. But he'll just walk up to the bar as if it's nothing and deadlifts 870. A couple days later, deadlifts 900. A couple days later, deadlifts 870 again. You're just like, what the hell's going on here? But he does seem like he's got some intense and some vigor to him when he's in the set. He's not yelling or screaming, but he's giving it a good effort. It's heavy ass weight. Puts the weight down. He's back to being calm again.
Right. And so it's not about the mountain pose. It's not about the positioning that she was saying. And it's not necessarily, not to discredit the GOATA guys, it's not about that even. It's about, there's a fluid experience and an intention to how I'm standing. And do I check into that? Do I feel the fact that my pelvis still has some movement here? Or do I feel like it's stuck in space? Do I feel my weight on my heels or my toes, or is it on my midfoot? Am I shifted to my right leg or my left leg? It's good to find these subtleties, just like we worked earlier with just these little shifts, right? These little lateral shifts. And Weck has that great explanation of the foot over head over foot, right? And then a lot of these great, what he's explaining is pivot points, these wonderful little axes of rotation that exist in the body with certain movements. But those also exist here in the pelvis. I could put a rod through your pelvis and we could find an axis of rotation that exists here. And it actually influences the whole body and whole posture because it's the foundation. So it's good to understand and to feel and to know there's a deeper, these things that people do are essentially your state of emotion is your experience, right? In a part of your body, it is conditioned with the mind, and it stores trauma, right? And it stores tension. And if you can't get to a place where you can affect your autonomic nervous system and feel your body in space and understand that interoception is as vast and powerful and important of a skill as proprioception. More important, right? Because it's the internal environment in my awareness.
And by the way, for people that don't know, interoception is your ability to sense what's going on within your body, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In from a somatosensory way, so I can feel my breath, feel my heart, how my heart's being influenced, right? I can feel the for instance, if there's sensation in the body that is information, a lot of times I feel like there's a disconnect from it.
This is what I loved about what we did yesterday, and this is in some practices of things like yoga and some other things, but you just really don't see it much in lifting, and maybe that's something that Ben Patrick has called some attention to when you're doing your Jefferson deadlifts, like you're thinking about A, B, and C, like you're actually being a man of thought. You're not just lost in like the weight. But what you were taking me through yesterday, I would get kind of stuck. Something would kind of hurt. And then you were like, see if you can do a different position. I actually showed Andrew some of what you showed me yesterday. And I was trying to move, say, my right shoulder. You're like, well, maybe there's something more you can do with your left. And I just, as silly as that sounds, I have never even thought about that. I think sometimes these athletes that we look up to, people that are good at mimicking physical activity like Nsima, I think maybe they intuitively kind of go to that. And some of the rest of us are kind of like, oh shit, I didn't know that was an option for me. So just simply moving my left shoulder more, I was able to rotate so much more.
Through your front side,
yeah, to the left. And it was, again, it was something I just didn't think of. But I think a lot of times we're lost in the amount of weight that we're doing. We're lost in the time frame that we do it in. We're trying to set these records or do these things that we deem as cool, and there's not really a thought process to it.
Sure.
And if you think about what we're trying to do in the gym, especially if we're trying to maximize the lift, you're trying to do the lift in the most optimal fashion as possible. And if we're going to do the lift in the most optimal fashion as possible, we should probably lighten the load up enough to where you can think about it, to where you can think about, oh, wow, look at that. My big toe is coming up every time I'm doing these squats with 300 pounds. Let me put on like 100 pounds and let me see if I can work my way. Oh, now my toe's down. Now my knee feels
just
much
start
better.
with body weight,
There
you
you
know?
go.
Or with a wonderful, that winning warm up, right? The wonderful part of that is it's all really neuroscience. It's based in, now that works wonderful in powerlifting. Now that same warm up, that linear movement in that path doesn't really serve a lot of other athletes outside of getting into an athletic position, right? If you're a shortstop or you're a linebacker or you're a running back, it's really that kind of 45-degree angle that you create where you're semi-loaded and ready, you know? So it's still good in that fashion, and you're doing it at such a light load and so many reps. You're sitting into the myofascial slings of the body and those eccentric loading of these springs it's all kind of essentially what we were doing. And what's cool, like with the GOATA principle, with that, the big thing is that big toe connection, right? So now you're getting the big toe connection. You're getting the platform of the foot loaded properly to bypass the arch. And then you're getting back into the heel. So it's like heel, lateral foot, great toe.
Almost doesn't matter if you have much of an arch if you can get your toes to move that way.
You create the arch with the activation. And that I saw you like, wow, I've changed my foot anatomy. You talked about that, right? But it's due to the fact that you're changing the way your body is engaging itself through these functional movements, right? It's the basics of, just like the baby, we don't need to make it more simple. It's a skill to get from your back to your belly, from your belly to your hands and knees, from your hands and knees to half kneeling position, from half kneeling.
Nothing cooler in the world than seeing a baby roll over for the first time, and they kind of throw their fat head back and they roll over, and then they're kind of like, "What did I just do?" Like their face is amazing.
Oh, yeah. And
remember that, Andrew?
Yeah. Well, it was funny because yesterday, because you've said this a bunch of times on the podcast, like when a baby moves, like when they freak out or what they're like, how fast they do it.
Oh yeah.
A couple days ago, he was just doing the thing where his legs, he was just going side like this way and then windshield wipering this way. And I was like, holy shit. I'm like, I need to film this because, yeah, it was like faster than any of us, like trying our absolute hardest. Like we
break
would
your back.
We would break a lot of shit, pull abs, you know, a lot of, and he's just like, blah, like fucking, you know, starting with a big old head and then rolling the rest of his body over. And it's just like, it's amazing. Yeah.
And he's generating momentum through myofascial slings, and he's exploring and feeling himself, as we all should as adults.
Be our instructor.
That would be cool.
It's that, honestly.
Let's bring
Actually,
him in.
you have a point.
I'm not sure what's going on though. He's starting to get a little like the arches of his feet. He'll like dig in there and like he'll go side to side. I'm like, hey, no, you got to bring your stance a little bit closer. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about because I'm only 1.5.
Sure.
And I'm like, nope, no excuses.
He's been watching Ido Portal.
Maybe that's
he
what it
wants to
is.
be able to do it
Oh,
from
yeah.
all angles.
Nah, that's true.
Well, here's the thing: we're all looking for influences. Maybe Ido Portal is actually
Watching him.
He is. He's studying the baby just like me, and he's studying animal patterns of movement and how do animals process emotion? Because they do, and they do it through physical means, and they move, and they have things they do. There's ways that they deal with the things they feel that are uncomfortable. But as humans, we try to deal with those same things in our mind, and we try to subtract the body. But first, the fact is we just deal with it. It's the American way. We swallow it and just deal with it.
We think about other people's thoughts a lot too. Those are accounted for. So if I'm going to have a particular posture, when you walk into the room, I'm going to be thinking about how you're going to receive that, and then so I'm going to change the way that I'm standing because you just walked in the room.
Which is silly, because and that's the thing. I am who you think that I am.
Right.
And that's not true.
Right.
You are who you are. And there's a freedom in releasing all these confounding ways of thinking. First, we have to identify the pathology is the fact that I'm focused on those things. And that's okay, because it's a part of our psychology, right? It's a part of the domestication that we went through as we were raised, which is important. I'm raising kids. I see like, okay, there's parts of this I need them to have this structure because I'm tired of wiping asses, and like they need to figure that one out.
I'm curious about this though. Like you mentioned, you start people out from the ground, and we were talking in the gym about like flow, right? And if an athlete's going to get into flow, they automatically have to have no inhibition in terms of the movements that they're going to do.
Right.
I think that something like lifting is, since the movement's like doing a squat or a good squat, there's a few cues and boom, it's done. And you don't have to do anything outside of that. But when it's a sport like MMA, when it's jiu-jitsu, when it's any fighting sport, these athletes are moving in such dynamic fashions. Like we were talking about the braced mech squats.
Right.
The boxer's not moving like this,
Nope.
rib cage over hips,
Exactly.
going back and forth, right? It's like if you, pull up a highlight video of Anderson Silva.
Yep.
You see the way he's moving his body into adaptable. And you you were showing the thing about the stance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anderson sometimes
Everything.
he'll widen his stance
and
and
he'll
come
switch stances
He'll
and
switch
whatever.
stances.
Like it doesn't matter.
So how
That
do
made
you
me
help?
so happy. That's my favorite MMA fighter of all time.
He's
I
so
love it.
beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
When we bring up this highlight, let's
art.
pause. Yeah.
The spider.
In the relaxation.
And that makes me curious because
Wait, watch him against. Oh my gosh, watch him against Forrest Griffin. There's a slow motion clip where he finished Forrest Griffin, and it's one of the most magical things. If you watch his torso and his face, it's so relaxed.
Yeah, these are just probably more knockouts,
But
right?
still, if you watch him in slow motion, you can see that his face and his torso is very fluid. And as even later in his career, where he had a lot of magical moments, were purely flow. He's in a state of observation.
Oh,
and
that
just
was
react-
unfair when he got him in that Muay Thai clinch. It was over.
so,
So how do you? What I found is martial arts and the preparation and working with fighters has helped me stretch my thinking more than anything. Because my that's it. Boom! Here it is. Look at this.
Rewind again. Oh
Yeah.
God, rewind. You got to
I
see
mean-
that tap again, bro. That's so disgusting.
It's insane. Just
Oh,
But he has an ability to really move and contort his body in some weird positions to the point where he's still able to put a lot of power into what basically looked like a jab
And it's
to
in re-
knock out a fellow
It's in re-
MMA professional.
and it's in respect to his eyes. What I'm looking at and what I admire is the fact that his eyes, just like with Lomachenko in boxing, their priority is positioning their eyes into spaces, into generating perspectives, into keeping this untethered, right? I see it all. And then now they're in a fluid reactionary state. But if you're in a state of, if I'm generating reactions and making you have, like what Forrest Griffin there was a reaction that was generated by Anderson Silva. And now Anderson Silva is just playing and flowing and looking for an opening to expose. And so your job as a fighter is to put your opponent into a state of reaction because now you're my slave. If you're reacting, you're a slave. And that's the same thing in life. If you're reacting, you're a slave. And that's why you live your life how you do. And I appreciate that so much because you prioritize making sure you're not in a state of reaction. And I think that's a quality to health and lifestyle that we should really focus on conditioning more than anything.
Become a slave to your emotions.
Are you a slave to your emotions? Because I think most people are, but they're in denial about it. And the best way I can help them is to help them find that out without me having to tell them directly, because that people don't want to be told that. People don't want to be labeled, and they don't want to be
You know what your problem is? You're an emotional wreck. Like that's not going to go very well. Like you're
Right.
really pulled around by your emotions aggressively, and it's not great. But they're not going to respond well to that.
So my objective from day one has always been, how can I be effective at helping people? And I realized the effectiveness that I can have is based off of how well I can help them find things and experiences within themselves. Just like when I was talking to you about your exercise, instead of me trying to condition you on a system or trying to overanalyze a problem, see if you can find something over there with your left arm. The least amount of information to where you produced a sensation and a connection to what I wanted to see happen, which was more movement and to connect, right? But if that was your process of finding that based off of me not giving you information.
We've had people come in and kind of right off the bat didn't have good bedside manner, and boom, just shut them down like that. You're not listening to them anymore. Like,
you don't respect them.
Even if you want to listen to them, there's some sort of little defensive thing where you're like, I don't know, it just feels like insulting in some way. Or
so, like, what do you mean? I'm curious. Like, what type of
there's some
interactions?
people that have come in that have said specific things to you, like on some of the testing and some of the breathing, some of the different things we've done.
Okay.
And I think Andrew and I have been kind of sitting there going like, oh my God, like this could quite possibly be one of the better athletes, in jiu-jitsu at some point, and we're around you every day. So we're like, this isn't possible. Like whatever you're saying, not that it's not possible that you don't have errors in your system, just like anybody else.
Yeah.
But when somebody comes in and just says something to you right away, whether it's you or whether it's me, I personally will feel a little defensive, even if it's something about you, because I'm like, they're not here all the time. Like they don't understand like what we're doing and what we're working on. And so I think that's why people kind of get offended. That's why I get offended. Because I'm like, well, you don't understand my story. Because we all feel that our story is super unique, right? And we feel that.
No, it is.
Right. It is. And we feel that our issues or problems are, they're very specific and they're very particular. So I think it's a thing where you can be a little defensive or sensitive, even as open-minded as we may try to be.
Right.
It's hard once you get kind of picked on. Oh, Andrew, this is why your back hurts. Look at the way you're standing,
And now
it's like, man, I don't know.
And I know it's like a little bit different, but even subconsciously, because like Chris Kidawski was working on Chris Bell. And, Chris is always like, every time somebody works on me, they're like, you're the tightest person, or your muscles are the tightest I've ever touched my whole life. And so Chris Kidawski was like, so already off the bat, they're setting you up to let you know that like, hey, you're the absolute worst I've seen. So I'm going to do what I can.
Right.
So, and even in that moment, if Chris is like, all right, yeah, I'm going to buy all in, his body's already like,
thank you.
Nah, man, he's not going to be able to do it because he's already telling you. Yeah. He's already telling you that it's probably not going to work.
So as a person that's a professional that's probably really trying, and his intention is to help Chris, and he wants to see a positive outcome because that's good for him and his business, right? But the labels sometimes in the systems they're labels, and that's the challenge I take is it's just say, let's be aware of the things we're labeling and realizing that now the emotions that those labels are generating are stopping what the person's trying to accomplish, which they probably want to help people too.
And by the way, I want to make a compliment because you mentioned Chris Kidawski, but everyone here, like Chris Kidawski taught us a lot, but especially when he was actually working on each person, you can tell this is why this guy is so popular with so many people, because not only is he actually doing good work, but he's amazing at communicating what may be the problem to that person, but communicating in the way where they're actually open to it.
Right.
And some will be like, well, get the fuck out of your feels. They're just trying to help you out. Like, for example, they say, well, it's because you're doing that, right? But at the same time, it's like, motherfucker, delivery matters.
Yes, it does.
Get the Pain Bible, by the way. That's Chris's book.
He has multiple books.
Great information in there.
Well, and then timing matters because you got to remember, what is pain? Pain is represented in your mind, just like your body right now as we stand. There's a representation in your brain that you can touch with electrical probing, and it literally is a homunculus, right? So now think about, there's a somatosensory.
Pull up a picture of a homunculus.
I'm like, how do I?
You're gonna laugh at this.
Yeah.
How do you spell
so,
that?
but here's the thing, that the one we know of is a motor cortex. It's the one that sits right there on the frontal occipital or frontal parietal junction.
Yeah.
But the
I mean, this is just when I searched it, so I'm like, what the fuck is that?
and look at the hand, how big it is.
Yeah.
So look at the one where it's that top left. Yep.
Oh, this guy.
That one. So that's the brain and how the homunculus represents the brain. So look at the size of the area of the brain that's dedicated to your hand. Those are neurons, like billions of neurons, right?
Wow.
That are dedicated to just your hand, right? Just this one area of your body. Now think about your hands contact with the ground yesterday, and think of those neurologic representation in your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now think about how when your hand's now fully active and engaged and grounded and connected to the floor, now what's happening in your brain compared to whenever I'm like compensating and the wrist pain and this thing's going on.
Yeah, and if you're trying to tell me about like, oh, you should be able to feel your shoulder. Like sometimes you do like, I don't know how much yoga you've done, but they say stuff in yoga and they talk real nice and real kind, and I'm just like, my wrist just feels like it's going to break in this position. Like I can't really think of some of the stuff they're talking about because my focus, my brain, the space in my brain is being consumed and overridden by this maybe particular pain or sensation that I have. Kind of just like the Outwitting the Devil book that was suggested to us by Bedros Keuilian, where poverty and fear are the kind of main things that can occupy your brain. And you think about if we lump some pain in there too, then we get into situations again where I was mentioning to you yesterday, you might be, if I said, hey, why don't you jump up onto that box and then jump down from that and jump on the other one? You might be like, what? Even though you heard me, you just might want a little bit of a moment to like think about it, and maybe you come up with your own version of it. But if you were like a 14-year-old kid that skateboards and shit like that, you'd be like, sure,
cool,
pop, and you do it.
I'll just do that right now.
Yeah.
No second thought.
Yeah, well, that's what I appreciate about you, is that you kind of have that attitude with the people we all work with, and I like it too because I can see it helps Mark kind of have the moment to understand and get comfortable with it, because you just jump in and then he can kind of get in there and makes him a little more comfortable. So it's a good team. It's a way y'all's team functions that I could see, that I don't know if y'all appreciate that well, but you're right.
These guys go through it first and then
Andrew didn't die. All right, I'll give it a shot.
And but in the same token, yesterday y'all kind of switched spots, you kind of, and then today I got to talk and work with you a little bit. So it was great. And from my perspective, learning from people and listening to what they say, like you're such a good active listener, both you guys, all of you are really. And that's something me and Batchy had a lot to say about. Everybody we connected with was really actively engaged in the conversations we were having. It wasn't just rushing to try to share their thoughts. And I know y'all probably are used to people coming in my seat and being really eager to share their thoughts, their ideas, their programs, and where I come in, I guess, in terms of adding value and looking at all the great things that you guys get into, is looking at, okay, look, actually, there's way more in common between these systems and these perceived competitors. No, man, we're all out here to help people, and the more we kind of lean into that connection, the more the businesses themselves flourish, and the more the systems can do, and the more populations they can reach. Because now, instead of me having to prove you wrong to help you, and versus like, well, like that mentality you're talking about earlier, where in a sense, I have to be right and you have to be wrong for me to help you. And that's a bad place to be. That's not a very good paradigm for a high level of success. You need to be right and I need to be right, and we need to work on this thing together. There is no right
unless
or
we're
wrong.
Totally wrong.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
You can get to, you know what I mean?
But that's a bigger problem, And I feel like sometimes we can investigate those problems through our movement and through this exchange of like trying different positions. Well, this is a little stale. Let's try a different position, right? And remembering that our sensation and that experience, if we're feeling moments of frustration, and I could tell in the very beginning that we had a little breakthrough, because there was a moment where I could tell that there was a bit of frustration. You're tired. You just did a podcast. You have a full day already. You already ran God knows how many miles. Your hip was hurting you. You were having to go into a place of focus where most people don't have that capacity, where that cortisol build up or whatever it is that the day does to us. Now they can justify being impatient.
Breakthrough feels so good because you kind of get like kind of hot and agitated, like literally get like physically kind of sweaty, and you're kind of halfway agitated. You're kind of pissed, but you're like, I think I can still do better with this.
And then you took a 2-minute walk. You got a sip of water. You came back with a fresh perspective, and I could see the energy in your body change. And that was so powerful for me to see, because everything I needed to hear is to learn about you. Nothing about what you said or anything you proved in that moment that you are willing to confront something and you're here. And almost that sensation, instead of making it, you avoid it and say, oh, it's not good for me. I got better things to do. It's like, no, that's the stuff I'm going to chase and get really interested in and get real excited about. And now when I get scared, those are the things that, okay, this is actually an opportunity. And every single time you confront a fear, it's a chance for you to grow, but it feels really daunting, right? But there's also a part of you that has to lean on your experience and say, oh, this is that thing that I do. And every time I do it, I come out the other side transcended a little bit, right? A little more enlightened, maybe a little, I've shaken off whatever it is, that pressure I was putting on myself. And usually it's the pressure of the eyeballs and the perception that I am who you think that I am, right? And
you have to know yourself too, and tell the coach or instructor or whoever you're working with, hey, you know what, I think I had enough.
That's right.
And if that coach is like, no, man, we've got, then maybe you found the wrong, maybe it's the wrong person.
And also if the coach is in a state of where, okay, well, instead of let's just throwing the baby out the bathwater here, let's just take it down a notch. Let's move it to a different position because we still need to get the work in, right? I'm still like, we're still here and we still need to utilize this
how
time.
about we bump the intensity back, or would you be okay if we move on to another exercise? Person's probably like, yeah, sure.
Thank you. And the flexibility to do that is really the key. And the adaptability, human to human to human, me working with you or Andrew, the same clinical approach that I had to use with really high-level chronic pain patients and building rapport with people that are like, they're isolated, they've been thrown around and used by the system, right? So you have a chronic pain patient that's already had maybe 2 or 3 back surgeries, and then now the neurosurgeon's just tired of dealing with it, and they send them to pain management, and the pain management is just filling them full of drugs, and then they still have a GP, and they might even have a motor vehicle accident tied in with an attorney and a chiropractor, and these are
a lot of stresses around that.
So I'll sit in front of a person that's just dying, but I realize that 80% of the things are things in their life and there are people that are associated with them that are throwing labels at them that benefit them and their priorities, not the patient.
Probably helps you a lot that you probably are confident in the fact that you probably know in your heart that you can at least help the person make some progress.
Right.
Maybe you can't fix it because maybe like there's just something, like we don't know everything, but
we need 1%.
You can probably, I would imagine you probably have a 100% success rate when it comes to helping people get some sort of progress.
If they show up, because we can only change so much. Just like what we did yesterday, I'm like, if we really have a really good, if I feel like we're understanding those ground forces and reacting in the pushing to push to reach idea to separate, right? So that's a concept, right? But there's a lot of different ways you can go about that for each person to feel it effectively. You could have the best session of your life and create motion and get all this range that you literally have never had, but only if you keep 30% of that tomorrow, that's impressive. But I would say even if you kept 10, but now I have to go back to that well and I have to keep getting water from it and I have to keep experiencing it, you by yourself in your space. And all of a sudden it becomes this thing that, you're like, I can do this on the wall. Like, I can do this on a bench. I can do it in so many different ways and give myself a totally different experience. And that day-to-day routine discipline, this playful activation of just say, let me use my arms and hands as weight bearing, as like legs. I'm gonna treat them like legs, and then teach my shoulder girdles to be like hips that seat into the body and the rib cage. That concept itself, and you just playing 15 minutes can solve way more for you than any system I can deliver you. But how can I make you believe that it's important? Is I have to show you and allow you to have that experience in a way that was fun, that you felt better when you started, even if it was just you felt like you can breathe deeper, right? Breathing deeper makes you feel better. You get more oxygen. You create more good hormones. And so if we can prioritize the expansion of the thorax, the way that our shoulder girdle influences that, you optimize the function of the rest of the body. And in martial arts, everything's about balance, right? Mm-hmm. So I want everything to be everybody's orthodox or southpaw. Well, for me from the movement perspective coming in to working with fighters, well, the outcome we're seeking is from a scientific perspective, look at what's happening, what's working, what's not. Well, this means I'm predictable, because that means that every time I see people get knocked out or counterstruck, which I don't want my fighters getting hit. That's my first priority. I don't like them having cuts and bruises and being hurt. That sucks. It hurts me. So I want to help understand that me being predictable and standing here with this chambered right hand ready to throw it, that's every time you see a fighter get knocked out, it's off their right hand. Mm-hmm. So the idea is, or even if a wrestler's grabbing this front leg, we'll just pull it out. Well, why don't they pull it out? That's the simplest thing. And I got distance because they're not comfortable switching stances. So the idea is there's more optimal ways of moving within a fight, but it's contradictory to the boxing dogma or the Muay Thai dogma or the Jiu-Jitsu dogma. And we got to realize that there's, what did Bruce Lee say? Be water. It's a blending it's martial arts is an experience. If you practice martial arts, it's for you and me. It's an individual experience, and what it can be is limitless when it's you against you versus you against somebody else.
What's really interesting about some of the part of what you just said is when you think of like Lomachenko, I think you mentioned Lomachenko. When he's in the ring, he's doing a lot of wild stuff that you don't see individuals in boxing teach, or you don't see people who are working on that like teach, but it's because he has a background of dance. Like he has that totally outside background dancing where the footwork from literally just play, he brought that into boxing. And I mean, I don't know if he has the best record ever or whatever, but like when you watch Lomachenko box, you got to pull this up too. It's insane. Like you can't even fathom. Like you're like, how the fuck do I train that? You know?
Well, watch his training. It's all about, it looks just like what he's doing. Like you said, it's neuro-optical based, right? And I got pages of notes of just my thoughts on these things, right? Because there's not a lot of.
All right, I'm sorry if you're listening to the podcast right now, and you gotta check this out.
Yeah, we're checking out Lomachenko. And watch his eyes. That's what I watch. Watch his eyes. They're always seeing everything. He never loses vision, even when he's slipping or underneath. And he's playing with his opponent's eyes. And a lot of his movements actually are creating obstructions and very subtle things that give him opportunities that other people don't even realize exist.
Well, I think, someone like Muhammad Ali just had like an incredible flow. He didn't do anything, crazy, but for his size, people forget that Muhammad Ali probably has like one of the most impressive physiques in the history of sport as well. Like he looked incredible when he was young, but he did some unconventional things. He would run in boots that were like heavy intentionally. Try to bring the knees up a little bit more. And whenever you see video of him, he's not just running. Like he's not just out there running. He's running backwards. He's running sideways. He's throwing punches. And he looks like he's dancing. And he would talk about it in the ring, how he's just going to dance around. Like he talked about George Foreman in that famous fight where he did the rope-a-dope. He just kept on the ropes and talked about how he's going to dance around George Foreman. And George Foreman was killing everybody. George Foreman knocked out Joe Frazier, I think, in 3 rounds. And Joe Frazier is the guy that, he gave Muhammad Ali a lot of fits and broke his jaw and all kinds of crazy stuff. So for Ali to be like, hey, I'm just going to dance around George Foreman, everyone's like, yeah, right. But look at him. Look at how many missed shots. Well, I mean, how demoralizing is that? I'd rather have you punch me than to make me miss like that.
Yeah. And he's having a blast. Hey, that's fun. He's having a good time.
That was 21 punches in 10 seconds.
And that's the whole thing. You have the mind-muscle connection, which is so valuable in training, right? And Ben Patrick talks about the mind. That's a part of what we were talking about earlier, where I was like, I love that idea behind the focus in the feeling of that, and not just the mind muscle, but the mind pattern, like that connection to this bigger pattern. And I think that's a part of that value in the training. But when it comes down to fighting especially, it exposes everything to the highest level because the consequences are so great. There's no greater consequences than in fighting. They're real and they're personal to that athlete. And so that's the things that you would rather them not have to be the truth be defined by the actual them getting knocked out, and then actually have a person that's open and vulnerable enough to listen. They're confronting fear at the highest level. Every fighter. there's not a fighter out there that's not scared. Fighting is fear, right? It is pressure, right? Then why are fighting camps and coaches still training fighters with pressure? Because I get it. Like if you're doing like Tiger Woods' dad and you're just going to like simulate pressure by just talking to him like he's a piece of trash, and like, well, if he can deal with that, he can zone out everything. You're teaching him to deflect. You're teaching them to actually to like pebbles off a stop sign. I always say it's like now they're learning how to ding. The information's coming and they're actually learning how to close it off. That can be a skill or it can be a total detriment, right? Because now I'm cutting myself off to other information, other sensation, other things that are important. What's important is that I notice and hear it, but it moves through me, right? It's just a thing where, do I take it personal? Well, me taking it personal is really the issue more than it is me hearing it, right? So the idea is dealing with the core issue is the fact that you're taking something personal. That might be an exercise, right? Or if somebody's saying something to you that you might even told them to say to you to help you, put pressure on you, and then you feel a certain way about it. Well, that's the thing that needs to be investigated. But if we're not spending some time in a deeper place, in active meditation, some of my most profound thoughts about where I can correct a thing I'm doing that may not be fair happens in that moment of isolation where I've cut off the sensations and I'm moving in a very diligent way. But my intentions are also to be open and to be reflective. And I think those intentions are the thing that are most valuable when it comes to performance. And with these fighters, confronting fear in a healthy way is a difference of championship mentality or a successful career. But then you lose when it matters, right? And so my objective working with fighters is realizing if I can help them treat the mind through this training, and we can work on talking about fear, and we can talk about, John Jones used to always talk about the samurai's death, right? So he would allow himself to go into the darkest place and to visualize losing and being exposed and being knocked out and just the worst possible outcome. And in the samurai's case would be death, right? But in what it does is from that point forward, you're kind of free. Because
is this like when we were talking in the gym, you mentioned some fighters have anxiety before a fight, but they never bring that up and they use their camp as like, they create
utopia.
You're better at explaining that. So
right. And Alan Belcher is a source of a lot of wisdom for me because he had this guy that has this huge seasoned career in UFC who retired basically while he was in the top 5 because of an injury at 26 years old at the top of his game because of, and not only that, he was having success in business. So he was like, he had some security, and security sometimes is our biggest enemy, because we forget what got us there. And those driving forces that seek comfort or lies, and because you get to the point where you meet goals or you do this or you do that, you meet this intended vision of this controlled thing you tried to create. And you realize how empty that was and how limiting it was too, because you could have set bigger goals if you wanted to, like there's the labels are the things we got to be careful of. And I think the wisdom in working with guys like Alan, who are confronting fear and do it in such a relaxed way, it's all about the mind. I'll tell you what, this is profound. This is one of the deeper parts of of this moment that happened with Alan in his last fight. Because I don't care how long you've done it, there's always it's a process of managing yourself, right? And we do all these breath work and yoga twice a week, and we go deep because it's so helpful for those guys in managing. And now they're talking about fears that I've never heard them talk about. They're talking about their emotional experience. And these are like, to me, sitting back, I'm like, now that's when I shut up and I just let it all go and just like let it, the outpouring.
But some would wonder, why is that important for this fighter to do? Like, why, if they feel anxious before a fight or they have anxiety about it, why don't they just train their ass off so they feel confident enough to be able to go into the fight? Why do they need to talk about it?
There's different levels, right? And there's different experiences for each person. And you have some guys that don't even know what loss is. They've just used that training and they've hidden behind that because they didn't have a reason to appreciate what we're talking about. And those are why undefeated fighters, usually it takes a really special guy that's really mentally strong and has a deeper sense of wisdom to really stay undefeated for long periods of time. Even if you look at like Floyd Mayweather, people are only seeing what they see. They're not realizing that through that dedication and discipline and training, he's learning things and insights about life, about opposition, about combat. Such a deeper. He's playing chess while everybody's playing checkers, and it's from his obsession, his showing up every day. And yeah, the training's cool, but it's really what is it teaching him in terms of how he's learning, and he's looking at it from such a deeper angle than people give him credit for. That's why he's who he is. But I think those are the things we got to remember. The mental is the thing, right? So it's the governor, and we need to sometimes stop thinking about the movement and the body and all these other things and think about the best fighters these days have great generalship. It's what they do without even throwing strikes. It's the way they're able to control and generate positions from their opposition. Like, look at Izzy. He's literally steering that guy around like a matador.
Yeah.
What did Muhammad Ali?
Of Silla.
He said, "These guys are bulls. I need to be a matador." And man, if you watch a bullfight, the matador that's sexy, right? The bull just looks like a big dummy, you know. And it's like, well, I don't want to be that guy. You know, I want to be the matador. That's cool.
How do you think differently? I'm actually curious about this. When you see somebody like Kamaru Usman and the way he fights versus someone like Israel Adesanya, I think Usman has a better record, and he was actually going towards St. Pierre's. But would you say that, like, comparing the type of fighters they are, would you say one is a better fighter than the other?
No, I think what they both are amazing at is knowing their self and being very honest with themselves and their own insufficiencies as well. And I promise you, both of them, their process doesn't include them trying to glorify their strengths. Their process is really being honest about their insufficiencies. And their conversations and training with their partners are totally different. You know, it's really, and then not only that, lifestyle. You know, they both don't put unneeded pressure on themselves. They both know how to process and deal with their emotions. When you hear Usman on Joe Rogan's podcast 2 or 3, 4 days after he got knocked out on national television, did he seem bitter?
I seem chill.
He seemed chill because guess
Very
what?
chill.
He knows I signed up for this.
I think that's the only guy to ever do that I've heard of. Like go and do a big interview like that after that's
A big loss.
a big loss. Yeah, it's huge.
And not only that, but imagine how you don't think him going on Joe Rogan was probably as significant as him fighting in that. That's something that he was probably really thinking about and building
it's a
up.
powerful person to be able to do that.
Sure. And so he was probably visualizing going on there and talking about him
Winning.
his success, right? So now the humility to go through and to be who he was, that's who he is. That's why he's a champ. That's a champ. That's a mindset. That's a way of living. That's a way he conducts himself. It has nothing to do with whether or not he's holding that belt. His posture is championship posture. He's assuming that identity, and him holding that belt is just a material thing. But he's a champ right now in his mind. It doesn't change, and that's all the champs. That's all the greats. They do that, and that's the thing. Whenever they get championship status and they have the belt, they're not surprised. Everybody else is surprised, you know. And so that's a part of their trust and commitment to that is because they're living the lifestyle. They're challenging their mind. They're feeling that moment that you had yesterday, and they're going to get a sip of water, taking a walk, and coming back to it, and they're finishing, and not letting themselves. If I quit that, what's stopping me from quitting anything? And every time I feel uncomfortable, I'm going to walk away. That's everything. Even if it's in your mind, if it's an emotion that makes you walk out of a room, but you might have lost the opportunity to get information, that's something that might be limiting your greatness, right? And these are things that are practices of life and awarenesses that we're able to. It's a game we can play, but first we have to transcend into a higher thing. We have to get out of the place of judgment and get into a state of witnessing and learning. And now it's an attitude of understanding and connection. And that's essentially when we think about neuroplasticity and flexibility of the mind. That's really the goal. It's trying to facilitate connection. And these things that we do sometimes in our thoughts, I think, are actually stopping our brain from achieving the states that we want to achieve. You know,
with some of the people that you're helping, how do you assist them in having a championship mindset so that they can get better. Because I think a lot of people, they don't give themselves enough credit. Like, anyone can be some version of an athlete. Anyone can go and utilize some of the stuff from the best people in the world, the pros, and they could actually utilize some of these things. Like, you'll see sometimes a pro football player might tweak his knee and then he's like on a bike on the sidelines and stuff like that. These are things that if you maybe you played a pickup game, a softball or something, and you're at your work and you tweaked a knee, you could be the similar person. You could have this kind of championship mindset where you're like, well, recovery is going to be for me to lean into this and get more movement. How are you taking some people that have chronic pain? They don't want to move. Their brain almost won't allow them to move. They got a governor set on them because they don't believe they can do certain things. How are you helping these people?
You have to respect their pain first. And I think a lot of people in my position, they try to discredit pain in an effort to achieve that goal. So again, their goal is to help, but they're doing it in the fashion where now let's just say that person, they have labeled themselves with that diagnosis of fibromyalgia or whatever. Oh, I have arthritis, I have this, I have that. Well, that's okay. That's just what it is. And that's nothing. And yeah, it kind of sucks that the medical system and literally a doctor having to classify that person so they can bill an insurance company and get paid. That label is really what's now a part of this person's existence. And I meet them for the first time and they say, okay, well, I have fibromyalgia and I have arthritis or whatever those diagnoses are, stenosis or whatever,
bulge discs, all these things. You hear people say it all the time.
Plantar fasciitis. Yeah. We're talking these are states. These aren't diseases or chronic. The fibromyalgia is a kind of a catch-all categorization of something where I'm not sure it's an affliction, but it's fibro. It's related to the fascia and the muscle. Fibromyalgia, pain of the muscle, in fact, fibrous tissue.
It's vague.
Yeah. But it's just pain of fibrous tissue, really, muscle.
Wow.
That's what it means.
But people think it's something they're tethered to.
Oh, it's like something like a genetic derangement or some type of disease that's like a real condition,
Mm-hmm.
So you've had to deal with a lot of people that have had fibromyalgia, and you've been able to reverse that?
Well, I think that's one thing we forget too in the normal population. Mm-hmm. It's everywhere. That label is used to prescribe medicines. Mm-hmm. So people have that diagnosis. Whether or not they accept it, it's up to them. But the ones that do accept it, that becomes their disability. Mm-hmm. Because their connection to this thing to justify to my family why I'm taking these medicines that the doctor prescribed that they don't think I should be on. Well, I have fibromyalgia. Well, I don't know. I don't think you need those medicines. Blah, blah, blah. So now they hunker into this to now proving this state of disease and dysfunction. So the people around them but all it does now is make you get worse and you get worse because you love me and you want to protect me. And so it's these negative downward spirals that I'm witnessing.
Yeah.
And then seeing in the clinic where I'm helping these people in different stages. And I realized that the biggest way for me to help them is to get to the point of having that conversation about the inner dynamics of the home and getting them to start to peel back the layers on why they are attached to that, right?
So you don't attack it directly from a movement perspective. You're like, let's see what's going on now. You sound like you're a psychiatrist for these people. You are,
because I want to help them. Wow. And I realize long term, and it's not based off of them needing me. It's based off of them finding something inside of themselves. And so I use movement to help create an experience of success. So a person that's not moving at all, if I can get them laying on their back in a hook lying position, their knees bent, and we could work on expansion and compression of the core. I just want you to start with the nose and the diaphragm, feel the body, feel the chest, and release. So we're going to let's say a 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out interval, which we know is going to downshift them into a parasympathetic state. So now, once I can see they finally connect to this and they can focus on this, the key element is internal focus, right? This is a primordial movement pattern. It's the breath. And that's the one that person, regardless of their condition, I can teach them how to do this, and they can feel an improvement. And guess what? When they sit up, it's visceral. They could sit up right now, and they said it was a 10 out of 10 when they arrived. How you feel now? 8 out of 10. Well, guess what? That's better. And what is it? It's momentum. Just like with the parabol, we're talking about utilizing momentum, and then you find this release where your body is not working as hard because you're allowing the fascial slings to connect to the motion, to the ground. And so it's the same philosophy. All right. It's just about trying to help them find the grounding forces of this, the gravity pushing there, and now their back and their spine is supported. And now gravity is moving into their body, and they can feel these movements that they can't feel standing or sitting. And so, and not only that, but I never lay on my back. Well, come on. Your orientation against gravity is the best way to condition your nervous system in terms of your vestibular system, right? Because if your vestibular system is based off of orienting your head position in relation to your body. So, for instance, if your head is never below your body, like in a handstand or even in like a big extended movement or a side bending movement or a side bending motion, you're not allowing the fluid in those hula hoops, which I always think of it like interconnected hula hoops that fluid's kind of shifting and moving through. And you got these little hairs that are nerve endings that are detecting the fluid's movement through those two canals. But what happens is we're always in these very isolated positions, and as we get older, we develop these little crystallizations due to the lack of fluid being able to circulate through those tubes. And so when the head and the body get in a certain position, there's a disorientation.
So,
right?
Real quick, do you think that individuals, over time, if somebody doesn't attack that system, there's dysfunction? So do you think people who are younger should be like just randomly going and rolling around?
Yeah.
Just like hitting rolls? And
if you look at my stuff, sometimes we just like literally, we'll lay on the floor and just literally roll across the floor and just figure out how to use muscles to move you while your hands and your legs are completely extended. So you have to find, yeah.
Yeah, and for some people, like if someone's in pain or has some soreness, you'll feel some mild fascial release doing some
big time. It's a soft tissue massage,
like Cadorment. Yeah, the floor is his teacher.
It is a teacher, and just like the wall is a teacher, it represents a plane, right? We all understand the planes of motion, the frontal and the sagittal, transverse planes. Now you're just thinking about these represent a plane, and it can cause me to now have a really strong awareness. Like we're in that sideline position, and we were working on posting and pivoting onto the arm. Well, if you notice, when you really roll into that arm, it gives you a perfect chamber as a fighter, right? A stand-up fighter, it teaches the elbow how to fold into the body, and we're built for combat. Your anatomy.
A lot of that pressure in there,
So think about health now in performance optimization, and now think about martial arts, right? And now think about it in what we're talking about. These are modalities that are helping to create, we're using the ground in these little fun little activities to create conformity where the body can conform to itself and it can fold and move into itself the way it's designed. Your anatomy is based off of your ancestors surviving. They were the winners, right? Like David Wick said. So your humerus is this exact length to reach the top of your iliac crest, which that creates a shield, a lateral shield. So the tip of your elbow, right? If you hang your arms at your side, all right? Now note the bottom of your elbow and now find the top of your hip, right?
Yeah.
It's totally covered, right? There's almost zero separation.
Actually.
It overlaps.
I got to kind of move down to that side, but I just see what you're saying.
Right. So your lower ribs and your pelvis, in males, your pelvis is 2 inches higher than a female's on each side. So your
lat runs right down into your hip.
Yes. Yeah. So your anatomy was based off of your ancestors.
Cool. You guys should just do that. You guys, if you're listening, sorry, if you're driving, I'm sorry, better pull over. Put your hands next to
it with one hand.
Yeah, you can do it while you're at the wheel. Just don't crash, please. That's dope.
Yeah, it's super dope. And now think about guarding your face, right? So if I bring my hand up to my ear, right? Because I always want to think about if you can cover the ear, because the shot behind the ear is the one that's devastating. Like if I teach a hook, I'm always teaching them to throw it aim behind the ear, and those are usually ones that catch the chin, believe it or not. But that's kind of the vulnerable target. So being able to access this space without losing, if I'm having to do this, right? But people don't even realize some people can't create a vertical position in their forearm, right?
You ever see those street fight videos with
right. And so
you know that shit.
No, dude, I
Those
see
hood
that
videos, man.
I see that shit in person. Yeah.
yeah. It's hilarious. And they're stuck on their back leg and everything. Those guys, a real trained fighter will destroy those guys, man. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not old school boxing.
Sure. But the idea is that all these things in fighting have really helped inform me back into understanding that this is really a holistic way of thinking in terms of creating balance in the body. What is yoga? It was what warriors used to prepare themselves. And when they prepared themselves, these static poses and the warrior poses and all that stuff, some of those have feminine qualities to them, right? So in our culture, it'd be like, oh, yeah.
That's very woo-woo.
Yeah.
But
if you think about like the warrior 3 pose, you're in that full split lunge position and you're having to basically touch your back leg and then extend this arm all the way out into this deep posture. And I used to even look at that stuff. When I started doing yoga, I did it twice a week at a local gym. I found this yoga. And it was at a Crunch Fitness. It was the only yoga class they had. It was like twice a week. And I didn't tell anybody for a year.
Yoga at Crunch Fitness in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Are they going to let you back in?
Yeah.
When you go back?
I don't go there anymore.
Okay, there you go.
That's where I started. I was in the closet. I was a closet yogi for almost a year, twice a week, dude. And even through my clinical practice, I'm like, I've always done yoga. I understand. Yoga is just essentially it's an alignment and attunement. And just like any machine, there's a process of doing so. But with ours, it's somatosensory, it's muscular, it's connected to the ground, it's connected to our relation to gravity and the feeling of it all.
I'm sorry. I'm just thinking of some of our listeners who are like, dog, that's gay. just straight at
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying. I agree with you. It's just like
I'm using these practices to train the most savage killers in the world. Yeah. Alan's fighting for a heavyweight bare knuckle fighting championship, and so he's about to take the belt in the bare knuckle world as a former UFC fighter. And these are things that this was a lot of the parabol and a lot of these ground force things that we work on. I've always did them in the clinic, but I didn't understand it in relation to like a specific goal. Alan was arm wrestling competitively in bodybuilding in 2-year period. When I measured his reach, it was like he had elbow contractures. Think about how hard it is to punch properly. Yeah, we had to remodel his body.
Can we pull him up, by the way?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Who am I looking for?
Alan Belcher.
And this is the bare knuckle. What's he getting ready to fight
BKFC championship. Yep.
Oh, shit.
Yep, the heavyweight title. And then Chase Sherman is a UFC fighter that I got started with, and that was back 12 years ago. Yeah, there he is. That's him on the right. Yep.
Whoa.
He's a savage, man. He's an absolute savage, and he's an athlete, and he's supple and quick, and he's dynamic. And that's he's a next level guy because, again, his process. I already know he's a champion, and it has nothing to do with. And people will find out.
Jack, dude.
Yeah.
Does he do any strength training on the outside to look like that, or does he do very minimal strength training?
So at this point, he was doing. This was kind of us coming off of him doing like bodybuilding type stuff, and then transitioning him back into trying to create all this length and really try to develop him as a really balanced mover. It all started in those fascial slings in the upper back, and a lot of those things we did, like we improved his reach by 4 inches.
Wow!
Explain that actually, because you were talking about that in the gym when we were using the parabol and also the WEC. What's the maces?
Yeah, the WEC Indian club type
lollipops.
Yeah,
but you said even your reach. Yeah, you gained a few inches because it helped to actually.
We can measure marks right now and go through about 15 minutes of that, and we could put probably 1.5 inches on it, tip to tip.
Yeah.
In days, you can add more and more and more because you got to think.
now.
You want to rewind there?
Tip to tip. So think about the scapulas, right?
Yeah.
And so we're thinking about, okay, this is as far as I can go.
Yeah, if you have some winging and stuff
Right.
like that, it's going to be shortened. Yeah.
And again, it's kind of what I was working with Winning on yesterday, where if you're attached to this, let's say a wall, for instance, and I'm reaching away from that wall, your instinct is to almost, or if you had a pole, you're going to hold onto that pole and want to stretch. But if you realize that pole is only going to get you so far, but now if you turn that into a push, you're going to push, and you just got 1.5 inches
and you can feel a stretch too.
of motion
Yeah.
as your arm can separate and create a bit of that kind of, there's a deeper pattern there, right?
Yeah.
And what it is it only exists if somebody punches. You have to slow down that punch, and you see at the very end in slow motion, you'll see there's an extension of that punch as the arm kind of gets away from the body. It goes out about 1.5 inches, 2 inches out, but it's so fast, it's the whip. And so that's the idea is even trying to create really good striking technique. It's being able to deliver without any recoil. So I never draw something back before I bring it forward. And so now everything delivers, and it's the hand goes before the foot even connects.
Yeah.
As long as the foot's connected by the time that shot lands, you have to trust your technique. What fighters want to do is they want to drive all the way through it. They want to drive through their targets, but it makes it slow. And even good fighters, some good fighters do it and win, using kind of suboptimal technique.
One of the big reasons why something like a lot of lat work will help a person be able to deadlift more weight, and it's something that probably is really not recognized by the strength community, but it's the simple fact that your lats will pull your arms downward.
Yep.
And because it will pull your
And
arms
inward.
downward.
And inward.
Yeah,
most
and
importantly.
inward. Downward and inward. Because it will do that, now you finished your deadlift 1/2 inch, maybe 1 inch sooner.
Yep.
Just by having that, you're getting the pull of the lats. You get big, strong, lengthened and strengthened lats are going to kind of sit down here. Your shoulder is going to be a little further away from the ear, and the deadlift movement
And your lat is encased in fascia, just like your pec and every other muscle. The shape of the muscle is 100% contingent upon that fascial encasement. That fascia is also a somatosensory organ. It gives feedback into that interoceptive system. So you're getting as much, it's as much efferent as there is afferent activity going on, right? So the information exchange is equal. We always think of it like we're generating this thing centrally and driving this power outward. But the information we get back is just as valuable, if not more.
The stretching that you were showing me yesterday, it was more like just movement. It wasn't really like stretching. It wasn't really like yoga or static stretch necessarily. Sounds like you believe in all types of stretching, but when you get to the end of that punch, if you throw your shoulder out further, to me, that stretch feels a little bit like some of the movement we did yesterday. And what I noticed about some of the movement we did yesterday and that movement there is that it kind of reminds me of the stretch that you do when you first wake up in the morning and you kind of stretch and your body's sort of out of control and it goes into its own little stretching thing. and then you like your calf muscle cramps up or something weird.
Do you ever have
every
that
time.
shit where you like stretch your leg and it starts
Oh,
fucking
yeah.
seizing?
Yeah. Everything's shaking.
Every single day. Yes.
You're like, am I going to come all over the place? What the fuck's going on here?
That's tone. You're pulling on autonomic tone. So when I have wheelchair patients that are sitting in chairs and I get them to lay on their back on the floor and extend themselves, it's like the hip flexor is fighting back and creating this
I think
perturbation.
we need to find more stretching. What's it called? What was that word you used with P?
Autonomic.
Perturbation.
That was,
As far as the hip flexors.
that kind of stretching, like that stretching that you do in the morning.
Well, that's the thing. What are you doing in the morning? You're laying horizontal to gravity. The same what we're talking about with that rolling earlier. You're orienting yourself. That's a yoga thing you do in the beginning of a yoga class. You're going to put these fingers as far to that side of the room and these toes to
Remember
that.
they have you do
far
that
side
shit
of
in
the room.
school? Just like in the middle of the day, like when you're a little kid? Have you
They
reached
had
for
you
the
do that in
stars
school?
and shit like that?
It's
Like usually in
decompression.
PE.
for
But
sure.
sometimes just in class, the teacher would, if you had a cool teacher, they might
If you had a cool teacher.
have you do some other
it's
shit that's more than just learning history or whatever.
It's decompression. It's just a decompression, but also
Feels good.
it's active elongation. We forget that if I'm slouching like this, I can push the crown of my head upward, right? So there's a like my neck can almost crane away from the thorax like that.
There's so many different ways to move.
Right. So when I engage those muscles are muscles that are creating decompression with my...
Makes everything else move, your chest and everything.
Right. So there's an active engagement. So people think about tucking their chin, they go, boom. They look down. But the idea is it's this crown of the head elevating against that vertical axis, right? Against that that straight 0 degree north pole.
Kind of makes you feel like you're standing like an asshole, right? But it feels amazing.
But it's not meant to be. Well, here's the thing.
Nsima, what's wrong? You mad?
So
we've had guys come on the show before flex like that for the whole show.
Literally, whole show.
So what is that position? It's the top. It's the top of an inhalation.
Yeah.
So how long do you hold it? As long as an inhale, right?
As long as people are around.
Posture moves. Posture is a movement. It's a waveform, right? So as I breathe in, I get taller. As I breathe out, I get a little shorter, right? And that's okay for us to allow that waveform to happen and to experience breathing through the body in a way where it is tied. Your posture muscles and your respiration muscles are actually kind of shared functions, right? They have cross paths. So, but that's the problem is that if the postures muscles I'm out of touch with the way my pelvis can be positioned and this and that, then the link tension relationships in my upper body, in my diaphragm's attachment, in my lower ribs, I'm losing that sensation of that's the balance, that's the alignment. It's getting the sense of how this stacks up against gravity. And then it's not about being held. Nothing should be held. Everything should have a slight yield to it. A little give, a little wiggle. And I think that's the key. And the awareness should be based off of the unstuckness. If we feel stuck, the idea is to use the breath that's typically how we release tension anyway. Andrew Huberman talks about the physiologic sigh. Well, what is that? It's the body naturally cueing you to stand taller, to get more air and to expand your thorax. That's like God's gift into your nervous system. It's like a button that's getting pushed due to your midbrain or your brainstem detecting the oxygen carbon dioxide balance in your blood.
Power Project family, how's it going now? We've partnered with Bubs Naturals, and they're an amazing brand. They have this just wonderful MCT oil powder that I put in my coffee in the morning, and they have this collagen protein. Most people don't get the amount of collagen that they need in. All mix well in anything, coffee, water, whatever. It's also Whole30 approved. But the thing I want to talk to you guys about real quick are these apple cider vinegar gummies. Now, if you go on Google and you type in apple cider vinegar, there's tons of benefits. Immune support, metabolism, digestion can, oof. But one thing you'll also come across is apple cider vinegar tastes like shit.
It's bad.
It's really bad. That's why they came out with these crack gummies. The reason why I call them crack gummies, and it's an empty little package of them, because we can't not eat a lot of them at once. They're really good for you, don't get me wrong, but they also taste really good. And it's hard to only eat 2 at once, and the serving size is 2. So you guys should get this. You should only have 2.
Good luck.
Good luck. But the benefits of apple cider vinegar actually from these gummies, I noticed that honestly, it's helped my digestion a lot. So
a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely has helped me, hit the bathroom a lot more consistently. Mark always talks about, may your shits be tapered. And I guarantee you with those, they will be.
They will be.
But just, please don't eat the entire bottle the way we do, but they're that good. And, I have tried apple cider vinegar and all that stuff. And it made me sick. I felt real bloated and I couldn't be consistent with it. With this, it's very easy to stay consistent.
We're too consistent.
A little bit too consistent, yeah. But head over to bubsnaturals.com and make sure you guys enter promo code PowerProject to save 20% off your entire order. Again, bubsnaturals.com, promo code PowerProject to save 20% off. Links to them down in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
You know what? People are, I know that you guys hate when I mention jujitsu. You're like, shut the fuck up about jujitsu. But this is why I think, like, if you have the ability to sign up for jiu-jitsu and just do it 2 or 3 times a week, whatever you can manage, you should. Because I'm trying to rack my brain for something that allows you with such just variable movement. If you have strength training in the gym, you're not going to get into a majority of these positions that you're getting to on the mats. But when you're doing something like grappling or jiu-jitsu or anything that allows you some type of movement in that fashion, you're getting into all those types of planes of movement that you're getting into in the gym, and then you're overreaching into all these different areas. That's why I think like over time, if you're younger and if you're older, it'll just allow you to age better because you're doing things that you otherwise your body just would never do, and then you lose the ability.
That's right. You're 100% correct. And why yoga is really connects with people that do martial arts of any form, whether it's jiu-jitsu, because I have jiu-jitsu guys all the time that are slowly starting to the culture. Like I said, now that you got Alan Belcher, the credible, highly respected warrior that everybody knows what he's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He would go to Thailand and teach them things that they were and a lot of the guys from the Dagestanis and a lot of those Russian fighters, there's content of Alan teaching them those certain techniques on the cage and the certain and he's the authority in that world at a point where before these guys were even really doing it at a high level. Not to say that that it's not the way, or it's not that he's like the source of it, but the thing is, he's always been involved with the advancement of martial arts in his own way, but he don't care about the credit or whatever. He's just living his life. He's living his best life. And even now when we're talking about and dealing with social media, the hardest thing to deal with is that there's a balance between the effort and focus you put on becoming what a champion is and letting people into that world. And so, because there's a confliction when if I'm self-promoting, that's energy that I'm taking away from self-growth in the same moment. So it's a confliction. There's a balance there you have to kind of find. And not only that, there's an authenticity barrier that is broken when you're trying to now formulate words and talk about things versus like Bachi just being there to capture moments that are just kind of happening, and we're just doing like what we're doing. And those are the profound moments that, and then I can go back and look at footage and watch people's movement and remember their mindsets, remember their emotional states, and I can learn more about these things that are influencing, that are deeper, these deeper influences. And, but the idea is that there's a simplification, right? So trying to take these things down to their most basic form, and then maybe somebody that's scared of getting punched in the face, right? And that's why they're not getting into striking. And now when I'm helping to engage people and help them find value in fighting in martial arts as a mechanism for health and training, right? Because training is so good for you, the discipline and overcoming hard things. And dude, almost 1 out of 3 training sessions, especially with wrestling, I hit a point where I'm like, I want to quit.
Oh yeah.
And I have to I'm like, I can't believe I still have this feeling that I like want to tell them, hold on. And I'm like, no, like suck it up. Like this is the moment, right? And take a breath and work through it and just allow myself to pass that thought. And I'm like, you're never immune to it. It's something you'll have to battle and fight, but at least there's a method that you can confront yourself. And you're putting yourself in that level of stress where you can learn the truth about what you're telling yourself and what's real.
Yeah.
And I think
wrestling is grueling.
Yeah.
Wrestling is grueling.
And I'm careful about how much that I bite off, but I always make sure to bite off something, know? And then that's the key. It's the balance. Because then if you do a wrestling practice and you're being competitive, well, usually every time I get competitive, there's a little tweak or there's a little something. And then now you take the next morning, this is all a method too of thinking we're training every day.
Yeah.
So it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, sometimes Saturday, and they're sparring on Saturdays hard. So all this has to be a method where we can do these things every single day. They have a positive outcome in terms of the lymphatic drainage, active recovery elements, and it's the first portion of every day. But like I said, some of what gets put up is really what I feel like is more applicable to the everyday person.
Talking about like the stuff you put up on Instagram?
The movement and the different flows and techniques. But the philosophy is based off of what I said earlier about we don't really condition flow, right? It's something we don't condition, but we all seek to attain. And what I'm saying is that there's a method to train to help your body and your brain achieve states of flow. But it's a practice, and it comes through focus of movements that A, cross the midline, B, allow for lateral movement of the eyes, and C, can allow you a full expansion and compression of the breathing mechanism.
By the way, what would you describe flow as being like? Because, when a lot of people may have never been in a state of flow with something. So what would you describe it like?
So like we were talking about, Patrick's talking about the mind muscle, and a lot of those isolation to this spot in the body. Mm-hmm. What flow is, it's the central nervous system in the body in its most efficient state, where you're disconnected from the body in a way where I'm going to grab that can, I'm going to put it down, and now there's this trust in now I'm in a place of witness. That's the most efficient state, and that's why I said the spiritual state of consciousness. When we have spiritual experiences, those are flow states that are legitimately they are flow. It's the same experience.
You don't have any inhibition of movement. Your body's just moving, and it's doing what it knows how to do at its highest level.
It's like you're fully aware of your body and yet unaware of it at the exact same moment. Mm-hmm. So there's a balance between your conscious thinking about the body, but then there's like this faith. It's actually a faith that it's there, it's efficient. Neurologically, it's when you're not, because the idea is that if I'm in flow, that stops it. Mm-hmm. Like the recognition of flow itself is the quickest way to stop it.
That's the most,
right?
Yeah, that is, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So just think about that. So what is recognizing flow? It's basically the part of your brain that writes a narrative, mm-hmm. and that's telling a story, the one that's concerned about the world as seen through Mark looking at me versus me looking at Mark. And that's a part of, now that's an opportunity to focus yourself in and to detach this psychological thing that we've done from the fact we wanted our coaches to be proud of us when we performed that drill. Mm-hmm. And we stood there in line and we held these postures like Dr. Beliza talked about. A lot of these things that we these traps that we fall into, it's based off of how we are. It's all right. I'll give you another analogy. A 12, 13-year-old girl in a high school classroom, they are literally do not want to be called on, do not want to be seen. Mm-hmm. They're collapsing into themselves, and their posture is a representation of their experience, mm-hmm. right? And not only that, so but if you monitor their hormones, right? And that's that whole world that's really well documented and understood with Dr. Amy Cuddy.
Dr. who? Amy Cuddy?
Dr. Amy Cuddy, yeah. And was a huge influence on me to just change the perspective and realize that, wow, we're dramatically influencing our hormone levels. And what she does is she'll have people stand in powerful positions in front of a mirror, right? For 2 minutes, and you get a 30% increase in testosterone.
By the way, guys, you remember that episode with Bedros where we literally asked him, hey, if you wake up, you have some bad thoughts, what do you do? He stands in front of a mirror. I love myself. I'm
naked.
Great.
Jumping up and down.
It's energetic. You're activating the body, but you're addressing these feelings through a practice. Mm-hmm. You're not just, no, I feel bad. Let me just grab my keys and go to work. No, you're saying, no, I'm not tolerating this. Like, I'm more than this. And these feelings I have aren't me. Like, I'm who I want to be. I'm making me right now. And you visualize yourself in a powerful state. And then all of a sudden you start to feel that. And it might take 2 minutes, right? That's like the thing, even with those flows that we're talking about. That 2-minute interval is kind of, for me, a magic sticking point, because we lose.
So you're talking about like when athletes are back to the flow thing, because you mentioned how athletes want to get into a state of flow, but they never train anything to get into flow. So if you can describe some of the things that you think help athletes get into flow, you're saying that they should be doing those for like 2 minutes?
That's the thing. Counting is counterproductive to flow.
Yeah.
Reps, all this stuff, anything that's essentially a label, numbers, count, anything. So that's the idea, is that we're trying to condition a mind-body connection. You're taking this really compound motion in this really well-established neurologic pattern that our ancestors, like the reason we have it is because of the things that they did to survive, right? They had to have their eyes in a position of observation. That's why our spine needs to do what it does. That's why that's why the shoulder needs to move, because if it doesn't get out the way for this one to reach forward, my eyes can't see behind me. So if I'm reaching that way and that shoulder's still there, see, I can only see it there.
Yeah.
Versus there. But that's the idea. It's like, if we think about it in those contexts, you're like, okay, it's just this ancestral thought. Like my ancestors threw spears, and in doing so, they had to do this stuff. So even though I'm a power lifter, my lat is a deceleration spring. So its job is actually to absorb and decelerate my arm as it propels itself through space. And that fascial braking system, the lat's kind of one of the primary braking systems, that posterior chain that anchors the pelvis to the shoulder. So that's the purpose and function.
People have done some wild shit. Like if you think about somebody shooting like a bow and arrow while they're riding a fucking horse, it's like, holy shit, like the rotation and you're the horse, you know, like that would be so fucking, like a lot of things that we've done in our past, it would be so difficult.
And that's what I feel like.
Things that were probably worked on a lot because we probably were just very physical every day.
And that's the thing. That to me is more, that's me saying like, that's actually my being. That's what actually I was born with. And the fact I can't do it means that at some point I've lost it. But what I learned is you haven't lost it. It's actually neurologically, it's just like code in a computer. You just have the programming still in a place called your basal ganglia that is it's basically a button you push and it has this giant expression, right, of neural activity that makes it really efficient, right? And that's through the same thing with the winning. It's the reps, right? And that's what's pushing that neurologic pattern into a deeper and deeper and deeper, deeper place of expression, where now when the button gets pushed, you get this really complex expression of movement, but it comes from one button instead of 6, right? And that efficiency, that's built into itself. So now I can use that pattern and that connection and that trust to that very simple neurologic efficiency, and now bring it into a place where I can create perpetual movement and flow with a parabol or a Bulgarian bag, right?
Can you pull up some of that? Because he has like a lot of stuff on his Instagram with.
There's some research
parabol
too
and
that things of this nature, and maybe you're aware of it, things of this nature can really help a lot with anxiety, right?
It is the mechanism to address anxiety.
Just going on something like a swing, right?
It is the mechanism because, like I said, every animal except for us, move their body and do things to address their emotions.
So you can take a 20-pound dumbbell or one of these special balls.
So he's a rookie.
Right?
So he don't have a lot of experience.
He's a rookie.
So I'm teaching. No, I'm teaching. But the thing is, watch is from going from a complete novice, and then look at it clean up. Look at the length in the upper part of the arc, right?
And now he's getting more confident.
And now look at the right leg where he's posting and controlling the whole movement with the grounded leg as the body rotates and pivots around that. And now what I'm doing here is I'm pulling the back leg a little bit, but the focus is the front leg and thinking of the full extension.
Oh, now he's moving great.
Right.
Look at that.
Yeah.
So you're utilizing the weight and the momentum through this pattern to allow the lat and that braking system to totally uncoil to its full capacity without any resistance. And so now you're programming it dynamically through this neurologic pattern instead of now the hanging is still great. But the idea is that this is a way to get a really dynamic and complicated movement to happen that is really, it's wired in there for every human, and it attaches to these these are little fun.
That was really cool.
Yeah. And so now that's conditioning the bicep. And so we're working on the full elongation of the bicep. So
It literally looks like the kettlebell is hanging there by a thread.
Right.
That's creepy.
So that's the idea, is that we the hand position stays the same. The body moves around the fixed position of the hand. And that's the common theme you'll see.
What I like, with a lot of these things that you're showing us, and there's so many ways to train. So I'm not going to say certain things are wrong, but, when we have a split, and we do like biceps on one day, we do upper body on one day, lower body on the other. I kind of feel like my upper and lower body are disconnected. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's some of the issues that I now have to work through because I I didn't keep them connected during my powerlifting
because
career.
everything was linear,
Right.
and now you're asking for this rotation. But the thing with running is we're only in this mild, small range of rotation.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the ideas with a lot of this is trying to say, okay, well, the torsion that we create through the trunk and generate through there, the spine is meant to, just like a rag that you wring out,
a towel,
and you wring out like that. And that's actually the coupled motions of the spine that give it its best function, that also address a lot of these joint derangements. Because the joint derangement at that L4-5 is really because of the lack of contribution of that upper thoracic or maybe some of that pelvic, function.
You would say maybe some of that changes if you go from like jogging to like running or sprinting.
It's good to know the very end. So, for instance, like the Bulgarian bag, I can utilize the momentum. Oh, it kind of got me there, right? And my releasing to that position is what got me there. Versus if I didn't have experience with that and I was to be asked to move there, I'm never going to find that place unless I have overpressure, some external assistance or whatever.
Or use some momentum.
Momentum,
to push you
right?
there, yeah.
So we're using momentum, timing, right? Injuries occur because of poor timing and motor planning subconsciously, right? So if you look at the deficits after an ACL injury, there's as many visual deficits as there is any muscular problem. They now start using their eyes to plan and prepare movement, right? And so if you take their eyes out of the picture, they're lost, right? But now you got to consider the value of addressing the conditioning of the eyes and putting the eyes in that's what everything's built off of in respect to the eyes. And so there's a condition where I can take just you tracking your finger and using your eyes, and it creates perfect segmental motion of your spine. So for me to address that derangement, the more I focus on saying, oh, we have this L5, let's go in there and really work on that derangement and push on the back.
Isolated.
I'm literally reinforcing the things that are causing you to focus on the area instead of recruiting and releasing and developing this pattern of motion where when it's done well, that's just a piece of the chain. It just connects along with everything else instead of having that obstruction occur there. The movement and the fact that I can recruit the rotation through the hips, find the pivot points of the body, find the post points in the body, see how it keeps my head back, right?
You came in at the perfect time because we've had a lot of other guests on that kind of lead us to the spot we're in now. We had Gary from the Human Garage, and we've had some other people come in. And Gary, he was explaining some breathing, like he had specific ways to breathe as you're going through, some of these various ranges of motion. But what I really love that we did.
This is a real estate broker. He's not even a fighter. I swear, I have attorneys out here, high level guys. I have orthopedic surgeons. And
I like that.
And this is all like none of this at this point I'm getting paid for. This is separate from my business as a physical therapist. This is my pursuit to grow and learn. And I want to learn with high performers and people that are open and vulnerable to growth. That I'm past the point of working with people where I have to convince them to help themselves. So at this point, my prime population at this stage, now eventually when I get back into, I don't want to limit what I'm doing because I feel like I'm learning so much. Like what we're doing here, I feel like I'm going to leave here with so much growth versus I feel like that growth is the thing I don't want to compromise, I
was going to mention is, by having the whole entire body work cohesively together, you're incorporating the whole body all the way to the point where even when I was on a knee and I was up against the wall and I was moving my arm around in circular motion, even though like my feet weren't really part of the movement because I'm on one knee, my feet were moving around, my ankles were moving around, my knees were moving around. There's a lot of stabilization going on in the stomach. And if you just try some of these exercises, I encourage people to go to your Instagram, check out some of these videos, and just give some of these movements a shot. I think that people will quickly recognize, oh, maybe some of that direct, rotator cuff stuff just wasn't the ticket for me at the moment. Not that can't be an effective exercise, but if you think about the dysfunction that happened there, there's something that led to the front of the shoulder hurting, and in normal cases, unless you did tear something right there, and even if you did tear something right there, it's probably from something else. But the pain radiates there. That's kind of just where it shows up, and so we blame that spot. But as we know from having other guests on the show, when you go to move that left arm up and you go to put it up overhead, that other things start to happen in your neck. Other things start to happen in the sling pattern of your body, and the opposite hip.
And the subacromial space, which is where the nerves are passing. So
because you can't make any space for that shoulder to move properly, right?
And now you create compression. And now if there's fluid in there and I elevate, now the fluid and the fact that that motion itself is going to put pressure in that subacromial space. And now the fluid plus the elevation narrows that space. It pinches the subacromial nerve, referred pain to the deltoid or to the anterior shoulder or the posterior shoulder.
So we hone in just right there.
Right. And not only that, it's an inflammation. So it's an inflammatory condition, right? So first, if we can get the fluid to process and move, now we can see when does the mechanics perpetuate that same sensation or not, or that tells us how much fluid and how much of those are the things that we can control in some way. Now you get the voodoo floss, right? Mm-hmm. And you address trying to push fluid out of the joints, try to even starve it of blood flow and oxygen. And especially on the knees, I love the voodoo floss on the knees so much.
Right on the kneecap? Or do you go up and
I go below the knee about 4 inches, 5 inches, and I go all the way above the knee 4 or 5 inches.
Because sometimes wrapping right around the joint.
I want to compress the joint.
Okay, totally. But you don't wrap right around the kneecap necessarily.
The whole thing.
Oh, you do? Okay.
The whole thing, yes. I don't want any gaps because then, then fluid can escape through that crack.
I just didn't know it was safe for me because I'm like, this feels sketchy sometimes. You know, the band kind of digs into you and stuff, but
and that's a part of
I'll do it that way.
Well, that's a part of that patellofemoral joint, and the fact is that you feel that pressure, and it may feel like it's giving a little tilt to that patella, which is more like what you're perceiving. But Kelly Starrett talks about it a lot. You're trying to create shear forces, and remember that the tissue operates; it glides and slides over itself. So you have your epidermis, and you have your dermis. Well, the dermal layer is your lymphatic pathway, and your veins are kind of moving through that space, and that's what's pulling all the waste products and all the deoxygenated used blood out of the body, right? And that's why all the veins are right here, kind of close to the surface. It's in the same
trend.
But then now you think, what's below that? You have your fascial layer, right? That's the encasement of the muscle, but it's also these fascial slings in this connective tissue. That's what's holding. That's why if I turn all my muscles off, like I can still stay up. And you see some of those guys that are like cracked out on videos and stuff.
Yeah.
They're literally the fascia and connective tissue is what's holding their bodies because their muscles are just done, right? So that's kind of the idea is those are like your last lines of defense, the ligaments and connective tissue. But when you get to the joints, you have joint capsules, but you still have these fascial things that are going on that are encasing these systems. And you have this fascial encasement, and then you have these long leaders that are passing through, and you have nerves and blood vessels, and you have all this stuff. So everything needs to have its own mobility. Your nerves.
You can wiggle that stuff around when you get into that voodoo band because it's a rubbery thing. It's kind of got like a little tack to it, and you can actually twist your knee gently.
Shear
and
forces.
You can twist it the other way, and you can walk in it and stuff
but
like that.
But it's healthy shear forces because it's forces that are really being applied to between the epidermis and the fascia, and you're trying to create movement and separation there, which is going to allow things to actually process and move along, kind of like that bruise you had yesterday, right? In those ground mobility activities, it's just like a rolling pin almost, just kind of rolling as you're perpetually just focusing on the movement itself and almost stopping thinking about the hip and just actually working on just kind of opening the body. All of a sudden, you're really doing some great work on that contusion to where today it's not that bad. It's processing along. In a normal situation like that, it's a 2 to 3 day window for that inflammation spike that makes that hypersensitization. That hypersensitization is actually central. That's expressed from your brain and your spinal cord. And that's the kind of thing I was telling you about earlier. The pain becomes represented in the mind, right? And now that representation in the mind has to be dealt with and addressed, and it expresses itself quickly. So you got to think, if I have pain somewhere, that representation in the mind is now obstructed, right? So let's just say instead of it being these nice clean connections, I got this fuzz that's kind of obstructing and binding these things together. So now not only is my movement impaired and disconnected, the idea is that my sensation of this two separate items here is also, so I have to work on cleaning up the cookies, and I have to clear the cock. All right?
Cache.
Cache.
Clear the cache.
Clear the cache.
Cache.
You have to defrag.
Oh, dang, nice.
You have to. Well, yeah, it's Andrew's words, right?
Sorry, clear the cock.
Right. You gotta clear the cock. Clear the cack, and then you have to get rid of the cookies, and you have to defrag.
Cock
right.
and cookies.
So I feel like
Good.
from a general standpoint, that's really what we're doing. We're just cleaning up the hard drive.
Uh-oh. And so he's got the
On that
munchies.
note, like you just said cookies. I'm gonna have myself a tasty pastry.
Delicious.
As we
Those are
continue.
good.
So yeah, I feel like that's the goal. Is neuroorthopedics is really the kind of foundation for me, and it's
Neuroorthopedics?
Neuroorthopedics is kind of the territory that we're trying to define, and the work I'm doing here feeds back into what I'm doing clinically. And we have, Neolife, we have 3 operations now. We're building a world-class, really great facility that's going to include a performance center and aquatic therapy at our home base. And then we're actually opening a 4th satellite right now. It's just a matter of some permits and things.
I'm curious, man. What got you thinking about a lot of this way? Because, when people are probably going through school and even showing some of the movements that you were doing there, it looks like you made up a lot of those movements. And that's a good thing because I don't know.
Yeah.
I know you got stuff from other people,
Sure.
but there's some things on your page that I'm like, I haven't seen somebody do that before.
Well, I think it's through your experience, and I feel like that's the thing. I've tried at times to try to narrate where my thoughts come from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of difficult. I could say, okay, well, you had functional movement systems with Greg Cook when I come out of school that really helped just really draw pull some things together for me in terms of, wow, like you got to really train the nervous system here, and these patterns of motion are connected. This is the way, right? And then Kelly Starrett, the supple leopard, now he took this and he made it a little cooler. Like he made it a little more, it was just like it was more appropriate to like working with athletes of different kinds and maybe even martial artists. And then also thinking about yourself as your best experimental case, him as an athlete and me as an athlete, like the things that we're able to learn working side by side with these guys. Like I'm doing everything that they're doing because I want to experience it with them. I want to know the level of soreness that they're feeling that day. And because also I want to make sure that they're not copping out of the work. Because I'm like, look, if I'm going through it and I'm dealing with this, I'm a doctor. I'm not a freaking professional athlete. So you need to be able to deal with this. This is more of let's just get through it. There's some mornings you just got to show up. And then once you're warmed up, you feel good. And that's a common thing with any trainer that works with fighters. That's the most difficult part because they always feel good once you get them warmed up. But, they'll definitely miss a lot of training days based off of, 2-3 days in a row. That 4th day, it's like, I can sleep in. That's fine. And you know what? If you're missing sleep, then yeah, you should sleep in. If you need to catch up and not let sleep be a problem, I can get that. But if that's not the issue and it's just soreness and you don't like the way you feel when you wake up, then that means we need to get there and get warmed up. We need to activate the body and get moving. And then now, once you've done that, now make a determination. And if you say at that point that I'm still not feeling it, then yeah, sit out, no problem. But we have information to guide us. Mm-hmm. And it's not based off of us speculating that that it's the best thing for me right now, because I'm the one that's really trying to spend time in that space of understanding what's best for you. And so even when you don't feel like it, I can feel confident saying you need to rest or we need to go ahead and get that work in, because there's a form of work that we can do that's going to make sure that 5th day you're going to be optimized and ready to go. On that, so that 4th day can be more of that active recovery, that mobility work that we're doing. That's appropriate anytime, any day. And the way I apply it clinically, because I don't have time to sit there and work with people in cases 12 visits over 6 weeks anymore. Mm-hmm. So I need to make a huge impact that's going to stick, and that's something that they can really value and hang on to in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and I might not ever see them again. So, and if that might be the only chance I have to impact them. But if I can plant one little seed or give them one little tool, that's giving them the framework to just spend. And then the recommendation is just spend 10 minutes twice a day, just like a child. Get on the floor and explore and just play with your kids on the floor and work on the shoulder taps or the open books and get on your butt and support yourself with your hands and notice that wrist impingement. It makes you want to stay away from it, but there's a point that you can put it that's actually okay. And so don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, I feel pain there, now I'm, can't do it. Because the avoidance that we have, that's the stuff that we've lost awareness to. Like we didn't realize that we can't put pressure through our hand there and how that's affecting the whole body, And the natural use of the shoulder is to support your body while you're sitting. And you watch in other countries, this is all, the orthopedic issues don't exist. You can walk into a room and see a 90-year-old woman sitting on the floor, no problems, and getting off the floor, and they're not compensating, they're not moving by straightening their legs and hinging upward like a lot of patients I deal with. They still have to get on and off the toilet. They still have to get in and out of bed, but we're laying on elevated soft surfaces and we're sitting on elevated couches that have armrests that are shoving our shoulders into our body. We're sitting in our cars resting like this, and then we wonder why we have this trigger point in our levator scap insertion, right? But it's literally these ways we rest, and we don't realize that we're actually slowly losing parts of ourselves. So,
Why do you like yoga? Some people have kind of said that they think that yoga is even somewhat dangerous.
It's the hardest thing I've ever done, that I've committed to, and that I've gotten outside of myself to do, because I've always kind of dealt with the fear of, or not a fear, but I've always been affected by people. So even growing up, I could feel tension in my body based off my anxiety. And it's a thing I think we all kind of struggle with, where I felt trapped in a way. And I breathed really poorly, and I played football for 12 years, and I played in college. And so I didn't, if I'd have known any of this, how much it could have helped me. And watching myself on film, holding my shoulder blades and,
the way you're breathing?
Yeah, just breathing vertically and no connection to my diaphragm. And then also the anxiety I had to deal with, going through school and being alone. I went to 3 different schools for years with nobody, with no support, nobody I knew. And I was scared, and there was a lot of fears that I dealt with, and a lot of hard things that I had to figure out how to deal with alone to cope, just so I can get through it, because I already wrote these checks. I already told these people back home what I'm fixing to do. And for me, I just don't want to, I want to stick to my word, and I want to do what I set out to do. And why? It's because I grew up around those people that wrote a lot of checks with their mouth and they didn't cash them with their ass. And I didn't respect them. And I wanted people to truly respect me for what I did. And because people are always going to have opinions about you that don't really know things. And I realized that used to hurt me, but then I'm like, things are hurting me that are out of my influence. So I don't have power, and I want to have control here. And I want to be able to feel like I can be the governor of my own body and not be affected. I was on the city council for 8 years, right? So I got into local politics just to try to help my community. But all of a sudden now there's politics. I'm like, well, it's just local government. It's not really politics. No, it really is. It's almost harsher there than it is anywhere, because now people have the right to say mean things, and you're a public official. You deal with it, right? They have the right to make assumptions about you or the things you've done, and with no evidence to support it. And it's almost like society, no, it's fine. It's because they picked that spot, so they're signed up for it. And so 8 years was kind of like the point where I'm like, this is why term limit should be 8 years, because that's about the point where I feel like my heart just can't take it anymore. And once I let go of that, that's right. That was about 2.5 years ago. That's whenever Alan was really, like, hey man, I think I'm going to really make a run for this.
So were you a coach while you were in city council?
Oh, I started my business. So when I got out of school, it was in 2012, and I went home 6 months later. I ran for city council because the guy that was doing it was not somebody. I'm proud of where I come from.
Yeah.
Our city, we won a state championship my senior year. We're proud of where we come from. D'Iberville, Mississippi is I'm not going to get emotional. It's special because it's a place that it's in between Biloxi, and we're always considered like the stepbrothers to Biloxi. Like people know about Biloxi, so but that attitude is always stuck with the tradition. And like we always have football teams that just are next level, and they're not always blessed with athletes. It's just hard. We're just different. Like our parents are different. Like the people in that community, the expectations, the names on the back of those jerseys recycle, generation to generation. Mm-hmm. And so there's to be relevant, you got to really push yourself. And you hear stories about all these people doing these things and these feats on the football field, or even fights outside of football, this and that, and you think that's what being a man is, right? So, from the framework we had, that was the pinnacle of success. Was because it's never been done. Nobody's ever won a state championship. So we were 16, 17-year-old kids with we developed enough discipline and focus to even that our head coach left us my junior year after we lost in South State. And we still had it in us to come back with it was a 9th grade junior high coaching staff that came in and took over out of really necessity because they were all from that same school system. And luckily they just kind of let us do what we had to do. And as 16, 17-year-old kids, we won a state championship. And we overcame insurmountable odds and developed ourselves in ways that, looking back, are really exceptional due to those circumstances, because they were most kids in that situation, they're not going to say like the head coach left the junior year, right? And then they were able to win state the senior year. And if that was the case, maybe some really great coach came in, but not to say nothing about the coach that came in, but he was just a junior high coach that let everybody kind of do what we were already doing. He didn't try to change
coaches
things.
In high school, middle school, it's different.
Yeah, yeah. But so we won state, get a scholarship to Nickel State for football, and so okay, I'll pay for my school. I'm going to be a doctor, right? I'm going to do this. I'm going to be different. I'm getting out of this town. I'm going to not to come back though. Like I want to get some skills and get myself sorted out so I can come back. And so played 4 years there. I even left because my eligibility was up for 4 years, and then I still had a little school left. So I went to Southern Miss, basically just to party for a year. And Southern Miss is a party school. Graduated with my undergrad, came home for a year, and I started working as a personal trainer at a local gym. Just in the meantime, I was also volunteer coaching at a high school. I was also working construction in the mornings. That's what I was saying the first part of my day. And then I started a thing called Rock Speed School, where it was I'd go to the local school and I speed and agility training with ladders and cones and things like that. And before I know it, I had 10 kids in that class, and so I had to add an hour to that. And then the moms of the kids were like, "Hey, we'd like to do something like this to stay in shape." So I trained the kids, and then I had a class full of moms, and it was all $100 worth of equipment, and it was I'd go out to a public field. But then I got into PT school, so I had to the client base I built at the gym, and then the kids and all that, I had to kind of move along. So I had a friend that I was like, "Look, man, just kind of come with me and check us out, and I think you would be really good at this." And he's into fitness and health, and okay, so he came in. So about half my clients stuck with him. We're like, "Oh, yeah, we'd like to stay with him," and now. He just won his 5th state championship as the powerlifting coach for Gulfport High School.
It's interesting that you were mentioning that. You don't hear about powerlifting teams in high school.
Right. His name's Logan Fowler, by the way, and he'll go into the Hall of Fame in Mississippi as the most winning powerlifting coach in history. He's only 35 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was working construction with me and when I got accepted to PT school and basically got introduced into this off of necessity because I was leaving, and then found a passion and love and desire, and just took it and developed himself and became this super dude, And but needless to say, that's just, I didn't want to leave that out because it's very powerful that not a lot of people win one, much less 5. And then so I went to PT school in Jackson, University of Mississippi, and that was really when I found my way. As soon as I got into first kinesiology class and I started seeing these things, I'm like, "Oh my God, this is it." The first time I was there, excited to learn and just jacked up about it, and I could study. And Whereas before I always kind of just got through it. And so finished that. That was tough. That was really hard because you're dealing in like, being away from home in Nichols for that time was tough. But then you go to Jackson and you're 2.5 hours away from home, but it's still, I don't have any support system there really. And there was a lot of hard things that you got to go through. So that's really where I had to adapt the most. And I think what helped me the most was all those times where I didn't have anybody to really turn to, that I was in a position where I had to complete the mission and I had to figure it out. And part of what I realize now as an adult is because of my grandmother, I was able to do it. Because when her role for me was like, it was like I could be a bitch. Like I could feel the fear I had. That I'm hiding and I'm trying to act like everything's fine. Everything's fine, but I'm scared. I'm anxious. I got these things going on. And I think back to those conversations that I had with her where I was vulnerable and just said, I'm scared. I'm alone. I'm broke. I'm crying, being that little baby, letting that inner child have its place. And then within 5 minutes, I'm back. I'm confident. I was ready to crush the world, And so those moments of vulnerability, I realized were part of what was enabling me to become who I'm meant to be. And I connected to that as a source of strength. But also it wasn't easy. I had to overcome a lot, but she had a way of letting this come out of me. And I realized that energetic exchange of me being allowed to be the victim in this controlled manner allowed me to totally put that victim in its place for the rest of the time. And obviously, as you get older, you don't need that as much. But as an adolescent, you look like a grown man, but you're still a baby inside.
Does this ever happen with athletes that you work with?
All the time.
Yeah.
And that's a part of my mission now in terms of using a lot of what my grandmother taught me, in terms of just being just purely compassionate and empowering through allowing me to be a little, instead of expecting me to hold it up and be together, she was almost like, it's okay, and through that, I found so much strength, and then that's the strength I try to really share with people, is that you don't have to be a certain way. You need to be honest with yourself about what you feel. And the quicker you can do that and you can allow people in your life to be that for you, that was so good for my grandmother too, because now she's needed, she's valuable, she's important. She's 80 years old, but yet her purpose is to keep me right, right, emotionally. She knew that. And that confidence that she had and that vigor she had that everybody talked about, well, I noticed it was because of who she was to people. People depended on her emotionally. Her phone rang all day, every day, with people calling about their problems and the things that they were dealing with and going through. And then I noticed people say, well, did they ever ask you how you're doing, Grandma? No, not really. And I'm just like, well, that didn't bother you? No. I'm just happy that I'm able to help, right? That they're utilizing me in this fashion. And I was like, wow, that caused me to look at things differently. And I always noticed how everybody was always surprised about her graciousness because she was unconditional. And she truly loved unconditionally. She never expected anything. When she lent the money, she wasn't lending, she was giving it, and well, Grandma, they're not going to pay you back. Yeah. Yeah. So what, and I'm like, wow, and as I get older, I realize that that's the way, that's the way is to love unconditionally and give unconditionally. And yet, if you're expecting something and you're not training yourself to really release the conditions, in business, you have to be conditional, right? Because it's a conditional exchange. It's a game. Just like any game, you have to have rules. Relationally, personally, you have to operate and practice unconditional love. That's for you. That's to help you. That's like if I love you unconditionally and you don't take it well, when I leave here and I'm on the plane and I go home, I'm proud of what I did. So I'm free. You might have a thought when you're alone that says, man, I didn't show a lot of gratitude right there. Now, essentially, so you're kind of a prisoner for your actions, not me. I'm still good. So that's the whole idea. And then the things we take personal, it's not really based off of our beliefs. It's based off of our tribal labels that we kind of grew up with, or these things that are ingrained in us based off of these groupthink mentalities. And so I found so much freedom in my life by trying to realize which labels and group tribe mentalities or thinking I was trapped in, and realized that's where all my assumptions were tied. And the assumptions I made were the things that were giving me shame and guilt later and creating this prison that I was having to live in, even though it looked like everything was fine, but it doesn't matter. What it looks like here doesn't matter. It matters what's going on in here.
Yeah.
And to get to the root of that is difficult, because to me, the things I'm doing with people, this is a platform. As a physical therapist, that's not me. That's just a part of my thing. I'm a coach, I'm a mentor, I'm a podcaster. I like to hang out and live a lifestyle with other people that are learning and growing and just vibe, That's it. And in doing so, it takes the pressure off of me. It takes the pressure off the people around me. And I think maybe we create conditions that are conducive to, that are attractive and that we want to do more of, right? And so it's the momentum, and realizing that when we're in a place that we lost the momentum. We just lost it. So we just need to kind of get back on that positive trend. But also when we're in a low point and life hits us in the teeth, don't rush out. Sometimes you can stay there and learn so much about what needs to happen next, and the people around you that aren't there when you do step backwards, well, maybe those are the people that you need to consciously remove once things move upward, right? Now that's where the championship mindset lies too. Now that you've learned this information and those people have revealed themselves, do you have the guts to now make a affirmative action in your future and to make hard choices to remove people that have already shown you, despite what they say, they've shown you that they won't be there when it matters. And then rinse and repeat.
What you got, Andrew?
You were in the zone, so I didn't want to interrupt, but the pen squeaking is pretty loud in the microphone. Oh. It's okay, no worries. But real quick, in regards to like the wingspan, like being able to add length there, are you able to do the same thing with your legs?
Yes.
Because hanging out with Matt Wenning, he was like kind of diagnosing me and like just making me do a couple of different things. Sure. But he was like, oh, your left leg is like 3 millimeters longer than your right. And then he talked about like you can do like some orthotics or that sort of thing. And
well, you just need to know if it's structural or if it's adaptive.
So as we were going into it, he's like, well, how long has your back been hurting? And I'm like, well, we're creeping up on 2 decades. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to assume that it's structural at that point if it's been this long.
And that's an assumption, remember?
Yeah.
So technically, the only way to really know is to measure. Measure the long bones.
So he actually had recommended that as well.
And that's the only way you can make no assumptions. And that's in case of recommending orthotics. I recommend that that you're sure, because those can have drastic changes, especially if it changes in the distance between your heel and your hip, because that's going to affect the positioning of your pelvis. And the way your pelvis adapts, it rotates. So to make itself shorter, it's going to anteriorly rotate. To make itself longer, it's going to posteriorly rotate. And they function independently. So if you have one leg that's really long, you're going to get an anterior shift because your body's trying to create an equal length, but it'll do so by creating some torsion here at the hip to suck that leg up. So those are the things that you got to be aware of, because if you correct the long bones in difference, where if you have the shorter side is going to posteriorly tilt to lengthen, just like if you were going to go heel strike to take a step, your pelvis posteriorly tilts to kind of stretch that leg out and get it in contact with the floor. So that's the biggest thing that you're thinking about in terms of addressing, like with a heel lift, to correct that. But and then also, if it's not at least, what I've learned, if it's not at least a centimeter variance, then most of the time you're better off just trying to treat it through other means. But if it's at least a centimeter, then that's typically where we'll add a heel lift and we'll correct it. But the biggest thing is to make sure that it's not a soft tissue adaptation. Because sometimes you can have equal leg length and you can have an anterior shift of the pelvis, which is going to suck that leg up. Or you can have equal legs and you have a posterior shift and that's going to lengthen that leg. So those are the kind of the things you got to play around with. We can talk about it, look at it.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And then so another thing I wanted to talk about was like, so like if I can hear somebody drop a lot of weight in the gym and I'm way over here, I'll tense up and like my back will even start to feel pain. Mark, somebody could push him, and Nsima could like get tackled, and they'll kind of like laugh it off, and it'll be funny.
Right.
If I like accidentally bump into a wall,
Sure.
my back lights up.
Yeah.
It is super sensitive.
Right.
So when it comes to like the mental side of like pain and everything, how can you get somebody to come back from that? Because it's like, right, for me, my whole my whole being is like, okay, let's just try not to be in pain today.
Sure.
So with every movement, my body is protecting my back, and the second the wind blows harder than I expect, I feel pain.
Right.
How can we start to reverse that to where it's like, I don't know, I can withstand something and
Sure.
be like, oh, I recognize that I got hit or I took a bad step,
All right.
but it shouldn't fucking totally debilitate me
Sure.
for a week.
So I think first you got to identify what's the enemy, or what are we really looking to confront here? Is it the back pain, or is it the hypersensitization, right? And the reactivity of the central nervous system. And so that's the thing that we got to parse out. And then how much is the back pain causing an increased autonomic hypersensitivity and hyperawareness, right? So that's the balance of your state versus the back pain itself, and which came first, chicken or the egg, you know? So usually there's a bit of the natural state of your being that could be a superpower, right? But if you go in the wrong doctor's office, they're going to tell you that you have a deficit of hypersensitivity, right? And that's the conversation, is making sure that while we're trying to address the back pain, we're not also creating more of an issue in terms of your internal, how you manage the internal self and your awareness of your state of excitability. That's the key, right? And then now the back pain's relationship to that is the next piece. And so,
Wait, can you explain the excitability part a little bit more?
Sure.
What do you mean by that?
all right, I'll use Mark for example, because yesterday it's all pretty fresh with his sore hip. His movement in his arms were the most notable limitations, right? That weren't even attached or technically affected by the hip, right? His head movement and his eye scanning was delayed. Well, what the hell does that have to do with his hip? Because he's in a state, the body's in a subconscious automatic state of hyper awareness and hypersensitivity triggered by this, right? But you can see it not only in the walking, there's something behind the eyes I can see. There's something behind, there's a difference in the way the pupils are dilating, the way that the goosebumps on the skin or the vessels even expand and contract, the smooth muscles in the body. The digestive system has a different state of tightness or looseness, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the part of what I'm talking about, is just the basics of what we know about fight or flight or rest and digest, right? And think about it as that's the background system. And so your muscle tone, or at least 80% of it, is basically just monitored and governed by your autonomic nervous system, your skeletal muscle, right? So like us just standing here, well, we're not thinking about it, but we're up, you know, and we're pretty tall. There's a lot of muscles having to work and be organized without any attachment to your consciousness, right? So that's the systems that we're working on interfacing with and realizing, that there's a way in that we thought to a world that was totally disconnected. But now people that practice mindfulness and breath work, it's like, okay, I can, now as I'm sitting here and I'm myself and I'm quiet, you get some of those same benefits, but I'm like, man, I don't have enough time to sit there and meditate for 2 hours. Like I need to get this stuff in, right? And so what I've learned is through Wim Hof breathing and through a lot of these ground-based movements and just doing it on a daily basis, and now letting the pressure in the ground react to the body and then spending time in those spaces, that's where I feel like I've learned more about this downregulation through my own experience, right? And then learning as you kind of move and track yourself through space, because you take a hypersensitive person, and I'm thinking about how can I downregulate them, and then once I get them downregulated, then we'll talk about their back, So now the gain on the amplifiers is just tuned up, right? You notice that thing of it.
Yeah,
Well, he heard it
absolutely.
and he heard it, but his body didn't react to it, right? So that thing is basically a part of your brainstem that's reacting to a stimulus to address a predator. And so that's you're in a state of fight or flight. And so and that's fine. That's not a bad thing or good thing. Sometimes, like I said, that can be a skill or a superpower as long as you're really aware of it and you can kind of work with it. But it's not blocking it or stopping it or changing you. If that's how you are naturally, like I said, lean into the fact that there's a lot of abilities that you have that they don't have, right? Or I don't have. And that's a part of it that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? There's something about that makes you that's special what you do. But then there's a part of it that you have to balance out and really confront and spend time with and be okay with being a little extra hypersensitive, but also realizing these practices of breathing, lateral scanning, and rotational movements can now get you to a place to where, okay, now that I spent 15 minutes down regulating, now let's talk about and work on the back and maybe do some more traditional core engagement and physical therapy related things, or more kind of really strengthening and harnessing the pelvic girdle and the core to address the back pain in a place where now you've gotten your emotions to a balanced state to where you're not overreacting to your own body. And now you can just spend time with it and learn about it instead of waiting for the doctor or me or anybody else to tell you and inform you on it. Because you can kind of, now I can really feel these connections between here and here. And when I breathe, I can feel this link tension relationship. And you're building your somatosensory system. And another finding from Andrew Huberman was that the insula of yoga practitioners was 50% larger. And what is the insula? It's helping us govern these states of awareness and giving us a firmer foundation to view the world that's not really over excessive or under excessive. Some people's issues are the exact opposite. They don't have that awareness, right? And we think about that end. That sucks.
Wait, so why? Because I don't remember if I've heard it or not, but why is it that yoga practitioners specifically have an insula that's 50% bigger? What causes that from doing yoga?
My theory, it's time under bound positions that are optimal, so they're not compensated. So you're bound in a position where essentially you're mechanically, your feet aren't pivoted and moved in a weird way, or everything's aligned, like kind of like when we were on the line earlier and we said second toe on the line and create that 90-degree space. Well, it's orientation. So you're just kind of, you're orientating, and now you're settling, you're altering, you're binding yourself to where, like Dr. Bleza, you have to breathe out of your back, you have to breathe out of your oblique, you have to, because you're cutting off sections of your lung capacity. And then you'll notice that that's what's triggering panic. Because even as long as you experience it, the most seasoned yoga practitioner is experiencing moments in that practice that every session they're getting into, their body's falling into panic.
I haven't done a yoga class in so long. I need
It's
to
like,
find.
well, yours is probably, you're getting it through jiu-jitsu too. So imagine your ability to stay calm while somebody's choking you, right? And the ability, even if they're in full, like say they're in full mount or in side control where they got their whole ribs and body on you, right? And they have you in like that head and shoulder control. Alan destroyed me. That's like, that was my introduction to jiu-jitsu, was like high level black belt. And so like I've never rolled.
That's horrific.
Yeah, like
especially that guy.
well, it's not, because the thing is, I've never gotten injured rolling with a black belt.
Well, yeah,
I've only been injured rolling with white and blues.
yeah.
Because let's do
They're not
spastic stuff.
spazzing. They know what they're doing.
So what I learned is it allowed me to grow a lot faster because I was getting right into the meat and potatoes and not having to learn through my own injuries and insufficiencies, and by getting choked out constantly, I can really focus on him kind of putting me in horrible positions and beating the crap out of me, and me saying, okay, I don't want to do that anymore. But also you're having to really test yourself in those yoga practices. The same thing you're kind of figuring and learning there. It's the same principle, and you're just trying to reach out into other aspects of your life and carry that in. Because then you notice you're in a argument at work, and all of a sudden, okay, like this is the point where now that time under tension, that stress, and me adapting to that in my own world can now spill out into this. And that ability to just stop and take a breath and notice the shift into before it gets into the pot's boiling over, you know. And those are the times where that same person is going to experience or say or do something, even if it's justified, that when they're alone, when they're in their own world, they will experience shame or guilt or both. And even if it's in the smallest sliver, right? But again, that's the point of like, okay, now you take the yoga practitioner that has this maybe increased switchboard into their autonomic system. And now in this moment, the fact is they didn't get caught in the weeds. They get in their car and they go home and they feel great about themselves and they're thinking about their kids and their wife and what's going to happen for dinner. And so now that's what I'm saying. You're taking the experience of that person just dramatically changed, and now their mind is maintaining a healthy cycle and state, and they're going to sleep good that night. You know, these are the things I feel like we neglect, and we forget that little spot where we lost our temper and we were a person that we're not trying to be. That's the thing that's really deconstructing the thing we're building. And what I've noticed is every moment that even in the most justified moments where I was really done wrong, and 100 people can be polled and they can say, yeah, you were done wrong, and I have an emotional reaction, I'm a prisoner to that emotional reaction. And that's the thing that I look at and say, if I can remove that, the quality of my experience in my life is so much greater in the long run. And
I also like, honestly, the mental approach that you take to looking at yoga, because if somebody in the strength community, if they're looking at yoga, they're probably looking at it when it comes specifically for the benefit of the
tissues,
sport, like powerlifting.
Tissues.
Exactly. So like, getting in all those positions is going to be beneficial for moving a barbell, but it might be beneficial for a lot of things outside of moving the heaviest load possible. So
it is. It's the mind, and that's what we're training. We're always training the mind. But we're thinking about the context of the body and our goals with our bodies and what we want to do. But we got to remember the limiting factor is the mind, or the accelerating factor is the mind. And when you're talking about whether you're a high-level fighter that literally can get knocked out like Kamaru Usman on national television, despite the fact that he's one of the greatest champions to ever live, and he can show up and it's all gone. He's not carrying none of that with him. And that's why he's a champ, because he had a moment that most people could turn into a career-changing moment, because how did I look? Oh man, I'm so ashamed. You know, like But those are things that that's what losers do. You know, they allow themselves to. Okay, like we're all losers sometimes, right? The winners are the biggest losers, the ones that put themselves in positions to lose constantly, right? And they probably take small losses constantly, but how well do they do it? You know, can we just take it on the chin and realize, and even when we do get frustrated and angry, an apology isn't for you, or it's not for them, it's for you, all right? And forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. These are all little things that we don't think connect to our performance, and they do. Like those little unchecked things in our life and our relationships, they matter. And I guess that's really what it comes down to, because every moment's a practice, right? The things that Andrew's talking about, you know, while he's sitting here in behind his desk, and he gets overwhelmed with maybe somebody texting him while this is going on, and you almost probably feel some of the same sensations, right? But the idea is, okay, what can I control? And all you can do is what the next step is. And that elephant is not going to get any smaller by us thinking about it. We got to pick up a spoon, and we can only fit one mouthful at a time, you know, and we just got to start eating. And the quicker we can get to it, the better, you know.
I'm just thinking of an element eating right now.
Yeah.
We're losing them.
Right. And the tragedy is seeing fighters that train and prepare so hard, and they skip this part. And then they step in there and they go into the tunnel, and then they lose. And you don't get second chances. Your record is so finite in fighting. Like it isn't like football, or like where you can lose the first 4 games a year and still win a Super Bowl, right? Or more. You know, you can have a kind of crappy record and still technically be a champion. But again, coming from a sport again where you can hide. Like I can take a playoff and the team can hold me up. You can't do that in fighting, because if the moment you're exposed, there's no hiding, there's no deflecting, it's so honest. And that's my attraction to it. is that I love the honesty, and I like the deeper element of the game that can get played. When I watch Anderson Silva, and I see the freedom he operates with, and I'm thinking the efficiency, and I'm thinking the balance in his autonomic nervous system when everybody should be having that hypersensitivity in there or whatever, but that's the ones getting knocked out. It's the ones that are their hypersensitivity is getting exposed. That hyperreflexivity is a thing that's getting preyed upon by a guy like Anderson. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the whole thing. And who's using more energy? Anderson's, he can do that all day.
Yeah.
He can fight for 2 hours like that, and he's in control. And that's because it's not all about knocking people out. It's about putting them under massive amounts of pressure and discomfort and putting them into a deeper and deeper tunnel. And the deeper you can get them into that tunnel, the better you got them, Mm-hmm. And the most beautiful thing to me is seeing a guy like Connor. That's one of the people that I guess did it best and is showing he's helped the sport grow so much, not just with what he's achieved, but his presence. He was one of the first people that really in that stand-up had just amazing generalship and control of that space. And then also he can knock somebody out, knock them down, and they fall, and he stands there and says, I knocked you down, now you stand up, instead of rushing in and jumping on them and trying to ground and pound. How many times have you seen somebody get hurt where their legs don't even work, and you see a guy take them down, and then now they're resting in the guard?
That Francis Ngannou.
Yeah.
I think it's Francis Ngannou versus God, who is that? Just type in Francis Ngannou savage knockout. There's this rough one. Anyway, we'll pull it up, but it just came to mind.
But that's the idea, is that now take that all as an analogy for life and think of every person is in a fight. We're all in a type of fight. We're all confronting fear.
Yeah, I think this is well, actually,
that's Andrew Zaragoza.
I lift the guy up off the ground, off
Yeah.
the mat.
he's fighting another.
He's got so many like this.
Oh yeah, well yeah. Just see him hammer fist these cats after he gets them down, man. That's just Jesus Christ.
Here's a.
Oh, this is done. Ngannou over Reem. Wait.
Oh.
I mean, Jesus, he was already knocked out.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
The worst was Michael Bisping. Who was he fighting? Gone.
He's gone.
That's
He's
Rock'em
gone.
Sock'em Robots.
He was no longer in the room.
Yeah,
No,
his soul left.
Yeah.
Oh,
He wasn't on this planet.
And that's the
hard
thing.
to see.
And there's another part of this, right? I'm a monster. Okay, there's a part of me that is right, and there's a part of me that is a devil. That's a nasty individual, right?
Yeah.
And I know because that's a part of what I used and leaned into as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
That was a part of what helped us win a state championship, helped me develop this super thing that could get me through a lot of the fears I had. So the thing is, as kids, we channel and use. The first time my 7-year-old, he's like, Dad, when I get mad, I'm really good, coming off the ball or whatever in football practice. And I'm like, yeah, that's powerful, right? It shows you that you can use that emotion and you now can do something you couldn't do before and you could win. But what happens is if we don't have somebody having conversations with us, now that's the way. And so then you got these guys, and guess what? They can come in and use that emotion to fuel them and to step in there with it and to make you the enemy and to have to charge themselves up in all these weird ways and win up to a point until they step across from the champion mindset, the guy that's doing it right, that's preparing his heart, that doesn't need anger to fight you. And you realize that guy is going to prey on you, not because of the fact that he's identifying that you're using your emotion, and he's going to accentuate it, and he's going to push you to your limits emotionally where you can't touch him. You can't touch him. It's like you're it's just a game to him, so that's the part that's so cool, is that you can think of it now. Let's say everything is a fight. Stress is the normal. Chaos is the normal. The structure we create, we think, that takes a lot of work to create organization in the universe in general, right? Because chaos is kind of the constant. So I think that anything that we can lean into, where we lean into the natural order of nature, right? And our connection to the way we've evolved from Earth. And just think of it in a less complicated fashion. And I feel like a lot of the indigenous people, or people, our ancestors per se, that didn't have all the distractions and the information available to them, they were able to access intuition and wisdom that's far greater, you know? And I think that our ability to pursue and to connect with ourselves and find information. And again, we talked about the mushrooms, right? And psilocybin, one of the most effective clinical drugs ever discovered, right? LSD, psilocybin, back in, the early, I guess it was in the 70s, early 70s, as it was introduced, was basically, they were like, hey, we came up with this thing. And they said, if any of you psychologists out there want to participate, we'll send you some pure LSD, basically. And then they started kind of putting it into practice, and then the outcomes from these cases are astronomical. Yeah. Some of the most successful outcomes in mental health ever. But again, politics and culture and all these things. The Nixon administration kind of ex-nayed everything. They put psilocybin as a Schedule I drug, and basically made any mind-altering and opening substance the enemy to the state. And those cultural beliefs and that propaganda and the marketing and the things are built into our beliefs as we stand today, right? And people now that I know that their perception of what those things are is so far off from the truth, from the experiences that I've had, and as a practitioner,
I'm actually curious about this because we started the podcast talking about weed, I think, but I've noticed that there's a lot of, within jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of people who just roll high. There's a whole tournament called High Rollers where it's like everyone just gets wasted, and not wasted. That's not the right word. Baked. They get baked. But it's funny because their ability to roll, when you watch them roll, they're doing a lot of very complicated shit, right? Mm-hmm. And some of them say that they roll better high than when they're not, right? So what have you noticed working with the amount of fighters you do? Fighters that might smoke before they fight or smoke before they train. Do you think, it has been researched, but is there a benefit there for them?
Yes, and it's dramatic. And the guys that I work with that do, and again, you're talking about there's from a practitioner standpoint, everybody should be their own practitioner. So we should all investigate things with an open mind and spirit in terms of really trying to gain a perspective of our own. And so the use of earth medicines can be used just like any other thing. It could be used as a coping mechanism to deflect and deny, or it can be used as a coping mechanism to accept and embrace. And also the anxiety that may perpetuate from smoking a lot of times is eased from movement,
Oh, yeah.
Right? That's why people that may not like smoking and sitting around people, and they might get real anxious, but if they smoke and go to the gym and get on a treadmill, or they go do something like jiu-jitsu that could be considered like a higher order activity, but it's practiced and the experience and the connection with that world is familiar with that person's body. Mm-hmm. So for instance, for them, smoking, it's actually allowing them to stop thinking and to flow. And if you notice, flow rolling is so much more productive, where you're not really trying to finish, you're really just trying to get little advancements, and then you kind of almost give up certain spots just to give them a chance. And that's a really ego-free, really nice mechanism to get better at jiu-jitsu without really having, but the problem is let's say you have a coach or instructor that's so focused on their techniques and their systems that they're trying to force you into, and you're getting all this feedback and cueing and all this stuff.
And by the way, for those who don't do jiu-jitsu, when he says flow rolling, sometimes people in jiu-jitsu, they'll be like, let's flow roll. And what that means is like you're now rolling with no intention of probably tapping them. Like you might go to an arm bar, but then they'll flow to another movement from an arm bar. You'll let it go and they'll go to something else. And they might go into a triangle, but then they'll let you come out of the triangle, and you just literally flow from movement to movement to movement. So that's what flow rolling is.
It's enough time for you to realize like, oh, I'm in a bad spot. And then, but at the same time, you're like, okay, you felt it. I felt it. Okay, let go. And then you move on. And now you let the perpetual movement does so much, man. And that's the same thing we're talking about in the conditioning of flow. with our own movements. It's just taking it down to a very basic modality that that's less complicated. Like I said, a lot of people can smoke and get on that elliptical and they're just vibing, just loving life. And oh man, my joints feel good. The lungs open, expand. But what it's doing is it's acting on your endocannabinoid pathways, which are all affecting your autonomic nervous system and its connections to your deep midbrain, limbic, and brainstem reactions and stuff like that. So it's another kind of way to, but you don't need weed to do that either. You can do that with breath work. So like the breath work we do is powerful, man. And the thing is, just like I talked, you got to stick your hand out. I have to actively put my hand out to receive this gift. This action of breath work, I have to sit down. I have to actively breathe in a way where I'm focusing on efficiency. And I'm learning that breath by breath. Every rep is just I'm going to get a sliver better the next rep. And I'm just tuned and connected to how I can build the momentum of this wave, this spinal wave, right? This weird thing. But every human body, that's an essential primordial movement that we kind of disconnect from. And I find that, and Ido Portal has a lot of that in his practice.
Yeah.
Right?
If you look up spinal waves, it's wild the way like they can move and they can have waves in their spine. I mean, that's what they call it, spinal waves. But.
So check this. So Mark, stand square towards me. There you go. All right, now just don't let my finger, hands to your side, don't let my finger touch your body. Like stay away. Move your body. Look at it. Don't let me touch you. So move away as I'm trying to.
That's my movement right there.
don't let me. Okay, yeah. So move. See how you do that? Right. That's a wave. Look.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. See?
Yeah. When you, ooh.
It's just because I was looking at this.
Oh yeah, you found XP movement. Yeah.
I don't know if this is what you were talking about, but
this was
exactly.
Those are spinal waves. But yeah, this is the guy I was talking. Well, we were.
Those are
about
just waves out of a different position.
But
this guy's fucking crazy though.
This is the crawling guy, right?
Yeah, he's been on all. He's been on all fours for like 600 plus days.
Going to town on
It's so
that
funny when he showed that to me. I was
person.
like, "Ooh, like what are you doing, bro?"
Hey, now.
But where's the one I wanted to show?
This dude is crazy. I think it's just so cool to see what the body can do when it starts to adapt.
Right.
Because like now he's literally moving like an animal continuously just because he's slowly worked on moving on all fours each and every single day.
And he's playing.
Yeah, dude.
He's just being creative. And that's the thing too, you got to think about what we compromise when we go in and use equipment and when we get on machines that have predefined planes of motion. It's not, we get good work or you can isolate muscle groups or a certain function, but you're cutting off the elements of your brain that give you inspiration. And you need to put yourself in a position to where your brain has to go a little deeper. For instance, with that paraball, like this thing can smash into my shin and really hurt, you know? There's consequences. And so I need to really focus and be skillful. And, that's another good one.
Yeah, when you look at Ido Portal, if you ever find a video with
That's
Ido
him.
Portal, yeah. When you find a video of him, he does a lot of the spinal wave stuff with a stick. So
That's Ido, yeah.
He'll hold a stick to someone's
That's what I was
body.
doing. So it's avoidance.
Yeah.
And so that's a trick that I learned from him that I use to help people develop these types of movements, because avoidance is where people even like, I'm not thinking about where I can't move. I'm just thinking about avoiding, you know?
I'm sorry, Andrew, I've been making you do so much this episode, brother.
It's all good.
Israel Adesanya highlights.
Okay.
Because I think honestly, this kind of ties in also to what we're talking about here. When you see him, avoid punches and stuff, like his torso, I mean, his hips are in one place, but he's, you know, and same thing with Muhammad Ali. It's a lot of those.
If you go to some of my training, we do another movement. I call it a tornado, but from different angles, we're looking to create rotation right this way. And then it's a heliocentric.
Shit. I gotta see that one again. Hold on.
See if you can find one where he avoids. He was fighting Martin Vittori, and he avoided in their first fight, and he avoided a head kick, and he bent back just like the Matrix.
See, this is inhibited
amazing.
movement right here.
Well,
Like,
see, his opponent's in a state of total reactivity and preservation. And that takedown was total. This is all survival. His opponent's just trying to survive.
yeah.
And that's the goal. It's just create a situation where all they're trying to do is survive and stay alive. And that's whenever that's when they're the most vulnerable for everything.
That is crazy. That like it's just interesting how you're watching a fight and you can see those postures. It's like,
Oh yeah, watch this. There's a head kick that he pulls back on.
Jesus Christ.
That movement right there, but he does it again.
Good luck. Jeez.
See how he gets into the head kick?
Oh,
Like right
there it
there.
is.
Wow.
Look at that.
That's insane.
God.
That's sick. But yeah,
Craziness.
but that's the thing. It's adaptability.
Yeah.
And let's just say for him, that's all pretty, it might be just genetic or his training. He's probably kind of creating those positions. But even if you're not Izzy, if you're Andrew behind the computer and you think about that motion of rotation with extension, and that's actually your spine. If you look at like even from couple motions of the McKinsey system or all these old PTs and chiropractors from back in the day, they already, and that's why even whenever you're going to get your neck manipulated, they bring you into rotation, extension, side bending. They're coupled motions of the spine. It's not just a linear movement. It's combining all these elements together that totally lock the spine, because that's the spine's designed to do. So what we call heliocentric rotations, just like if you watch plants in slow motion, they actually mirror the sun. And so again, I think that's another down-regulating movement that you can use along with the breathing. That's another tool, just another tool.
Yeah.
They're all just modalities and different ways of stimulating and tricking the body to divert attention to one focus of tracking an object. And that simplicity now gets away from all the complication of the movement, because you look at it like, oh, wow. But it's not cueing it, and it's just being able to quickly get into it and just let the movement define itself. You know,
Take us on out here, Andrew.
Sure thing. Thank you, everybody, for checking out today's episode. Please drop us some comments down below. Let us know what you guys think about today's conversation. We got pretty deep. That was fucking cool, man. Thank you
hit a
so
lot
much.
of
Yeah,
awesome
that was
different
fucking
topics.
awesome.
hell yeah.
So we want to hear what you guys have to say. Please like today's episode and subscribe if you guys are not subscribed already. Please follow the podcast at MB Power Project on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. My Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter is at I am Andrew Z. Nsima, where you at?
Join the Discord. Down below. At Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube. At Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter. Robbie, where can people find you?
Movement_doc on Instagram.
A lot of cool stuff on your page.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
What do you guys think of Nsima's mustache?
I think I made him mad.
Did you say something?
mad?
Because you had said he looked like
Oh, yeah. Lando Calrissian. Which I found that as a compliment, but you, motherfucker. Who did you say I look like?
And I admitted, I was like, okay, maybe there was a little racist on
You
my
are
part.
an asshole.
The first person I thought of that was black, bald,
Hardaway.
with a mustache, Tim Hardaway. And I was like, yeah, you look like Tim Hardaway. And then he pulled him up, and I'm like, maybe I should have said Michael Jordan, like I think he would have been like,
I would have taken
"Thanks."
that, dude.
Yeah,
I would have taken
so
that.
I switched my answer.
He normally has like full beard going.
Yeah.
If you remove the flavor saver, it takes a whole different personality.
I like the flavor saver, though.
It gets creepy if you take this off, though, is what I'm saying.
Oh, man. It's just funny. Hey, yo. You know what's funny, though? I texted this is fucked up. I texted my girl today because she left the house before I shaved. I was planning on shaving my whole face. But I texted her, I know you're itching for the mustache to rub your
Oh, God.
And then I was like, whoops, wrong person.
What did she say?
She was like, dude, Nsima, you must be joking. It was so quick, too.
So you better be joking.
Oh, my God.
I'm at Mark Smelly Bell. Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye. We're out of here.
Oh, God.